Ladies and gentlemen, can you take your seats, please? Ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Amor Motley, with her, accompanying her, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Senator Dr. Jerome Wolcott, Minister of Health and Wellness, Colonel Bostick, let's remain standing for the anthems, please. Please keep standing as we start, as all Barbadians like to start with a prayer. From Pastor Reverend Dr. Laurel Scott.
Please join me in an attitude of prayer. Holy and gracious God, our hearts are grateful this day. We thank you for all of the blessings that you have bestowed upon us, and especially we want to thank you for our home, the most beautiful place on earth, Barbados. We want to thank you, God, that you have spared us from many natural disasters, and even as we give thanks for our own protection, we remember our sisters and brothers in the Bahamas and how they are suffering. We ask that you give us the compassion that we need to help each other in our time of need. And especially for this time, this moment, this hour, when we meet together to discuss what is the situation in our homeland and how we can help to make it better. We want to give you thanks, oh God, that over the years you have raised up men and women who have come into leadership at particular times and for particular purposes. And today, in the tradition of Deborah and Judith and Indira and Margaret, we thank you for Mia Amor. We thank you that you have raised up a leader such as she, who will be leading this nation for the next several years. We pray, oh God, that you would give her strength and you would give her power and you would give her wisdom. And since her name means love, we know that she already has love, that along with meting out justice, she would also do it with an attitude and with a spirit of love. And so, oh God, we thank you for this time and this place, and we pray your blessing on the proceedings of this evening. We give you thanks in your precious and holy name. Amen.
Please be seated. Prime Minister Honorable Mia Motley, Ministers Senator Dr. Wolcott, and Minister Bostick, Mayor Adrian Mapp, Sir Hilary Beckles, Permanent Secretaries, Team Barbados, fellow Barbadians and friends of Barbados, good evening all. Good evening all. That's a more Barbadian way. You have been asking for it. The Prime Minister is here. Welcome to the Prime Minister's Town Hall, an occasion for you to hear directly from the Prime Minister and her team what is the current situation in Barbados and the planned future, and for the Prime Minister to hear your comments, concerns, and suggestions upfront and personal. Prime Minister Motley considers engagement with the diaspora so important that she has made this conversation the first engagement in what will be another hectic week for her and her team as they attend the UN General Assembly. As you know, I consider it a signal honor to be part of her team, representing Barbados here in New York as Consul General. And I'm thrilled to have both the Prime Minister and my direct minister, Minister Wolcott, along with Minister Bostick, here with us this afternoon. We at the Consulate have worked in the last year to execute the Prime Minister's vision of reaching out and embracing Barbadians in the states for which we have responsibility, promoting a unified approach among associations, engaging with younger generations, and working to bring support, skills, and investment to Barbados. I believe Team Barbados, the Consulate, Barbados Tourism Investment Inc., and Invest Barbados, along with the mission, we all work together, have been dutiful in executing our mandate with a mix of activities. There has been early and ongoing engagement with associations, as recently as 2 weeks ago, to discuss independence activities. And I'm extremely happy to report that there is again an earnest conversation among associations to form another umbrella body, and most groups have pledged their support. Thank you, Ian, for taking this initiative. I'm also happy to note that I met with Barbadians in Connecticut, and out of that came a determination to start a new Barbadian organization, as there was none. Progress is being made, and just 2 weeks ago, they held a picnic attended by 60 persons and have already submitted their plans for independence. There has also been, for the first time, a dedicated meeting with clergy, because we feel it is necessary to build a stronger relationship with this influential group to help with the serious issues Caribbean people in our jurisdiction are facing daily. Notably, to date we have held 2 summits, one on business and one on health, bringing Barbadian officials to New York and New Jersey to interact with Barbadians as they discuss the various issues. Both of these, one involving the chair of the QEH board, Mrs. Juliet Bino Sutherland, and the other, Ambassador Clyde Maskell, government's chief economic advisor, were extremely successful and are still generating discussions and inquiries. Recognizing the need to get younger generations of Barbadians invested, Team Barbados has started something called Conversations and Connections, a series that brings young people together to network and pitch business ideas. 3 of these have been held, and at least 3 young persons, one an American married to a Barbadian, have been to Barbados to explore their business ideas, from an integrated tech project with an app to an eco-hotel. We have also had interest from a number of other businessmen, one of whom just returned from Barbados pitching an interactive platform. One, a frequent visitor to Barbados, who is interested in 3 different businesses, and Minister Kurt Humphrey is about to start discussions with the University of Dartmouth on possible collaboration on fishing. A welcome project by the QEH is the Care Bear project started by Mrs. Holder, which aims to give every patient of the pediatric ward a stuffed toy, and we want to thank all of those who have contributed. Of course, the Consulate has kept up its work on visa and immigration issues. And I wish to take this opportunity to reinforce that all should be very aware of the changes to immigration laws, tax laws, and health regulations, and that all should participate in the upcoming census. As we say every time, take the opportunity to become citizens of Barbados, a matter I am sure the Prime Minister will address. I believe in working hard and having some fun. So the staff picnic, which for the first time embraced the wider community, was a hit. And we are grateful to have the opportunity to spread our messages in activities in Boston, New Jersey, and certainly at Barbados Day. I think all will agree that Q in the Community New York regathering was a massive success in every respect. For me, the planning, production, and execution embody all that is the Prime Minister's vision. A collaboration between the New York Consulate and offices in Barbados. Collaboration with associations here, the 66th, 67th precinct, and numerous individuals, all coming together to connect and reconnect, indulge in Barbados' culture, and be updated on what is happening in this case, the gathering. It proved an essential platform for regathering, and those attending were the first to receive some of the paraphernalia that will be available from now on and throughout 2020. Today, you receive some in your buys as well. The success of Q, some 5,000 attending according to police, and 10,000 viewing online, represented the best of Barbados and stands as a classic example of what we all can achieve when Barbadians forget narrow interests, personalities, and other affiliations and work together for a bigger cause. I will leave the gathering and all that to the Prime Minister and her team of ministers, because those are the ones you have come here to hear. I look forward with Team Barbados to continuing the work with all and carrying forward the new energy in New York and elsewhere. And as I'm fond of saying, Barbados has come so far only because of the unity of our people. And there's nothing we cannot achieve as long as we work together. Now, an important part of this session tonight will be the gathering, and there are various elements to that. And we just want to start with a poem by Negus. Because these are the things that you will be involved in next year when I hope all of you and more, your friends, families, and all those who love Barbados, will be coming to reconnect, enjoy all aspects of our culture, but more importantly, have conversations with various entities to see how we together can forge a new Barbados, which is the Prime Minister's vision. I think I'm going to move on because we are pressed for time. I'm going to ask that our first speaker, we will serve Negus for later, which is Minister of Health, Minister Bostick, be introduced. Tracy Jordan to do the introduction, please.
Good evening. The man called the Colonel has been given the task of maintaining and improving one of the two great social planks of Barbados's development, the health service. It is not by accident that Prime Minister Motley has chosen Minister Jeffrey Davidson Bostick for this role. Known for his meticulous approach, the Minister of Health is slowly but surely changing the approach to healthcare generally and improving the QEH specifically with the necessary results. One important development has been the opening of the first 24-hour polyclinic service, the first of 3 so planned. Minister Bostick's disciplined approach comes from a long and distinguished background in the Barbados Defense Force, where he spent 25 years. A Cave Hill graduate, his specialized military training included the prestigious Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, UK, the British Army School of Infantry, U.S. Army School of the Americas, Panama, Center for Hemispheric Defense Studies, Lester Pearson Peacekeeping Center, Canada, and the Inter-American Defense College. The specialist in security and counterterrorism has been commanding officer of the Barbados Regiment, aide-de-camp to the late Governor General Sir Hugh Springer, has had 2-year stint with the regional security system, been security advisor to Cricket World Cup 2007. A member of the Royal Victoria Order, Lieutenant Colonel Bostick is now in his 2nd term as Member of Parliament for the city of Bridgetown, where he grew up. Ladies and gentlemen, Minister of Health and Wellness, Jeffrey Bostick.
Fellow Barbadians, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It is a privilege and an honor to be here to interact with you for a few minutes and hopefully to socialize with you afterwards. Oh, great. A few weeks ago, Tropical Storm Dorian sat over Barbados, but we were spared. That storm became Hurricane Dorian and devastated our sister islands of the Bahamas. But having been spared that Dorian, we are still faced with our own Hurricane Dorian. Not by name, not by nature, but I'm talking about non-communicable diseases and the significant challenges they are having on our island. Social and economic challenges. And these challenges are impacting our delivery of healthcare services in spite of the very best efforts of the government of Barbados. And I thank the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance that even though in difficult circumstances, that we are being given resources in order to do the job. But NCDs are affecting our hospitals in particular. And I'm speaking about the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and our 4 hospitals for elderly care. And this is an area that is presenting the greatest challenge at this point in time. Although we've done a lot of work in terms of trying to get the hospital to improve the delivery of services, this scourge continues to challenge us. And this is one of the areas where the government has been thinking outside of the box in collaboration with private sector interests and civil organizations to be able to provide what is required for our hospitals. It doesn't matter how much money we put into healthcare in our country if we are not able to arrest the situation relating to non-communicable diseases, we will continue to be challenged. And I am happy to report that 1 year after I would have spoken to you in a different place, that we have begun to see some significant improvements within the hospital, but we have a long, long way to go. The advent of the 24-hour polyclinic, which is something that is very innovative, not only in Barbados, but I would say in the Caribbean, that 24-hour service has been able to see to date around 900 patients per week. And we are talking about patients that normally would have been visiting the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and waiting for very long periods of time. And we've been able to see 900 persons a week at an average waiting time from door to doctor of about 2.5 hours. And that in Barbados is a significant achievement. But in spite of all of the economic programs that we are facing, like the BERT program, we have still gone beyond what I would say is the normal call of duty in Barbados. And Barbados, I believe, is the first country in the Caribbean to officially offer access to healthcare services in our country to all CARICOM nationals and other migrants who visit our shores who are also entitled to a certain basic level of health care. And we've done so because Barbados is firmly committed to regional integration and the free movement of Caribbean nationals to our shores. And if you're smart, you would recognize that we cannot be thinking about Barbadians alone, because our space is open to our neighbors. And so a public health threat in any one Caribbean country is a public health threat to Barbados. So we are forward thinking in that regard. I'm also happy to report that we've been able, for the first time, to have a documented policy on organ donations to assist us with our transplant program. And this is vital because as a result of the NCDs, we have some problems with persons on dialysis treatment, dialysis machines. And so to be able to facilitate transplantation, then we decided that we will take that policy step and we will follow it up later this year with the necessary legislation to be able to make that a reality. And that is also going to redound to the benefit of the people of Barbados. But all of the things that we're doing, we cannot do alone on island, and we depend on assistance from the diaspora, from Barbadians living abroad. And that assistance is in terms of technical assistance, and also those who have the wherewithal to make any contribution or donations to the country, to the health sector. And I know that you've been having some experience, you've been experiencing some difficulties, some of you, from time to time, in terms of being able to make that happen. But I give you the assurance that together with the Ministry of Finance, that we are working on a system that would allow us to produce something, some documentation for you to guide persons who want to make donations, so that we then would be able to facilitate and expedite the process of making those contributions back to the country. So in spite of the difficulties we are facing, things are looking up for healthcare in the country. There are challenges. We know we are fighting a battle, but it's a battle that we are confident that we will win, because we have the political will, the political leadership, and we are sure that we can depend on the assistance of you, our brothers and sisters in the diaspora. So with those few remarks, I would await any questions later, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Bostick. We're going to move right on to our next speaker, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. And we're going to ask Ms. Helen Walker, Helen, to please come and introduce Dr. Wolcott.
Thank you. Good evening. Over the last year, Barbados has made amazing strides in foreign policy, all aimed at transforming its outreach and connections to nations with the end results of keeping our country relevant in the world and positioning it for the future. Importantly, our foreign ministry is now being driven by a business approach and delivery of investment, technical support, and exchanges that will benefit our citizens through training and projects for decades to come. You asked over the years, why have Barbados not connected with Africa? Well, Barbados has. We are now in regular dialogue with Morocco, Ghana, and Kenya to start with, and it is expected that new missions and consulates will be established in these countries. Nearly 30 countries have been released from visa requirements, so their citizens can now travel to Barbados, a mechanism for facilitating tourism, investment, and business. All of this work and more is the delivery of Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Senator Dr. the Honorable Jerome Wolcott. Minister Wolcott possesses a range of characteristics which make him uniquely placed to head this vital aspect of Barbados's affairs. It is said that he's the most connected man in Barbados, with an uncanny ability to attract admirers at every level, regardless of politics. He also has a well-deserved reputation as an administrator and overarching thinker, with comprehensive knowledge of many areas. An acclaimed surgeon, Minister Wolcott brings the same clinical analysis to bear, and it is said that if the Prime Minister is the hardest working person in Barbados, Senator Wolcott is just a step behind her. A graduate of the University of the West Indies and the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh, he worked at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital from 1983 to 2001, ending as a consultant general surgeon. The former associate lecturer and examiner in surgery at Cave Hill, University of the West Indies, Minister Wolcott was appointed to the Senate in 2001 and was appointed Minister of Health. He was elected to the House of Assembly in 2003 and served Christchurch South until 2008. From September 2008 to 2013, he worked as project manager and then executive director of the Caribbean Public Health Agency, bringing together 5 health agencies under one. Outstanding work that has helped to rationalize and improve healthcare throughout the region. Believe me, this is a very short version of his resume. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to introduce the man whose personal mantra is excellence on the basis of preparation, knowledge, and delivery. Minister of Foreign Affairs, Senator Dr. the Honorable Jerome Wolcott.
Thank you. Thank you. Good. As I listened, I was wondering if it was really me she was speaking about. For those of you who know me really well, there's some things that she left out. Suffice it to say, good evening to the head table. Good evening, Sir Hilary Beckles, and to all Barbadians present this evening and friends of Barbados. I am pleased to see you in your numbers, recognizing that recently you've had a number of activities in the city in terms of having your queue in the community and a recent town hall, I believe. So I was worried that there may be some amount of fatigue and tiredness of seeing persons from headquarters. But clearly, you're here. Welcome and good evening. Can't hear you. Good. Last year, we addressed you in a town hall shortly 3 months after we had won the election. And we spoke then about the difficulties being faced in terms of the perilous state of the economy of Barbados. I promised the Prime Minister that we're going to keep it simple, we're going to keep it short, and give a lot of opportunity for interaction and questions. But suffice it to say, we have improved somewhat since then. The economy has been stabilized. We've introduced the BERT program, which several of you would have heard about and certainly are familiar with, which dealt with, in terms of, had 4 phases of it, 4 parts of it. One in terms of financial and the fiscal stability and fiscal constraint. One to do with the rescheduling of a massive debt that we had, and a national debt, as you all know. The third phase was in doing this, preserving the social services and social sector of Barbados in terms of health care, in terms of the free and university education, etc. And finally, in terms of promoting growth and further development of the country. And this is where the Ministry of Foreign Affairs comes into play. I know oftentimes people associate the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and classically this is so in terms of diplomacy, and some of you might think just cocktails, etc. But we think at this point in time, in a vital phase of the development of our country, that there was a need to take foreign affairs to the new sort of foreign affairs, move away from the classical diplomacy, still maintaining it is necessary in terms, especially in dealing with certain countries of North America. But certainly to look at the whole idea of trade and business in terms of creating opportunities for further investment and development, and of course encouraging more and more people to visit Barbados as part of our process in creating growth of the economy. With this in mind, we identified that it was time for us to look further afield. Barbados has been independent for over 50 years, and we were stuck slavishly to relations with North America, with Canada, with United Kingdom, with Europe. And having left Africa 400 years ago, we thought it was time that we needed to retrace that Atlantic journey, where slaves were brought from the west coast of Africa primarily, across to the Caribbean and North America, that it was time that we, recognizing the growth of African countries, that it was time for us to make that transition, to go back to the African coast again. And so we thought that it was vitally important that we establish relations with Africa, recognizing, of course, that Africa has 54 countries, and that the average growth rate of African economies is about 6%. recognizing that Africa perhaps has almost 500 billionaires, and we've been avoiding this massive continent for several years. So we've embarked on an issue in terms of moving towards Africa, in terms of having relations with Ghana. We expect to establish a mission there later this year. We've gone to Morocco in Northern Africa, and we also will be establishing a commercial mission there in Casablanca, hopefully later this year. And more recently, we've had, in addition, of course, we've had 2 visits, President of Ghana in June and the President of Kenyatta of Kenya in August. In fact, the President of Ghana has been the first foreign head of state to address a session of our parliament, showing our natural inclination to trace our roots and to get back to Africa, not only in terms of historical purposes, but also in terms of stimulating new growth and trade and investment between Africa and Barbados, and indeed the wider Caribbean. We've also looked further to the east. We established relations with China in 1977. And China, as you know, is one of the superpowers now. Our relationship with China is not a new one. It is one now that we are trying to make the most of. And we figured that by having established that relationship back then, the Chinese recognized that we were one of 4 countries that took the bold step of recognizing them back then, that now in times of plenty, we should certainly be benefiting from the Belt and Road Initiative. We are not fooled. Barbados is not a foolish country. We take things seriously. We make wise decisions. And I know you would have heard about issues with Belt and Road and other countries, but I think all of you know the Barbados way of doing things and the Barbados common sense and the Barbados way of checking the fine print. And certainly we are looking in terms of China, whether we recognize it. China has the largest number of tourists traveling globally per year, and we need to get some of them into Barbados. It has multiple billionaires. We need to get some of that investment into our country. In addition, we've been focusing on the Middle East, and we've been reaching out to the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, these countries in terms of development and assistance to Barbados as far as we can. Over the last couple of months, I think many of you, or years indeed, would have heard the issues concerning us in terms of global warming, the increasing numbers of severe hurricanes affecting the region, and the whole issue of climate change and global warming is being addressed and being discussed at international fora. Clearly, Barbados, as a small island in the Caribbean, we've been spared. I think some of us believe that Barbados is special to God, that we've been spared by these hurricanes. But we have been lucky thus far, but I keep worrying. We were spared by Dorian, but I fear that sooner or later, that we might not be that lucky. And we have to be prepared. And there's certainly needs for us to be involved in mitigation and resilience to be able to face the devastation of hurricanes. I think you just need to look at what happened in Bahamas over the last 2 weeks ago and see, could that have easily have happened to Barbados? They had NASA, their capital, from which still functions. What would have happened to a country like Barbados? And so as a government, we think it is vitally important to address and to speak at the international fora in terms of the issue of climate warming and the adverse conditions in the situation and the need for countries who have been largely responsible for this global warming to come to the table in terms of paying and contributing to the protection of smaller countries like Barbados, who've contributed hardly anything in terms of the climate, the global warming. That brings me to the role that you have to play. I've spoken about moving out. I've spoken about the BERT program. I've spoken about our youth thrust into Africa and Asia, and indeed globally in terms of speaking of climate change. Next year is the Gathering 2020, when it is not just an opportunity for you to come home, you and your friends, during the course of the year, but it is also for you not only to make that interaction, but several of you have skills, have done quite well up here and can help Barbados in various ways. You can get involved in various projects. My colleague minister spoke in terms of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and the health system. There are several of you with years of vast experience, which we need not only to come back to Barbados for a short time, but to get involved in projects, be it restoration of wards, be it involvement in certain schools, in adopting schools in your former villages or areas where you develop, and playing a more integral and useful part in the continued development of Barbados, recognizing the importance and how you feel about that rock and the connection between your hearts and Barbados. And so we're encouraging all of you from this January 2020, starting in St. Lucie, until December. And it's not for all of you just to say you're coming for crop over. The whole issue is in terms of organizing events in particular parishes specific to that parish, hoping that you who come from different parishes will come during that month to be part of those activities specific to that parish. And of course, you're all invited to come back in December, when we all gather from all 11 parishes in Barbados. But we're also coming, in terms of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to give you something. And so we will launch on the 1st of October, a competition, a simple competition. There'll be a regathering website. And we are encouraging you to register and encouraging your friends and families to register. And there'll be prizes. For those of you who've managed to get 10 or 20 people to register, there'll be draws every week. And indeed, the private sector in Barbados has come forward. There'll be tickets to travel to Barbados. There'll be staycations, a number of hotels offering weekends, all trying to get you motivated to get your friends and families interested in registering, indicating that you're coming to Barbados in 2020. Finally, I want to say that I look forward to welcoming you all then. We expect to have a wonderful time in 2020. I promised the Prime Minister I will be brief so that she can speak and that we can have an interaction with you, because I'm sure there are a number of questions that you are interested in getting answers to. I thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you, sir. We're going to keep it moving because the Prime Minister wants to be here. We're going to ask Mr. Usiski, the Business Development Manager at BTMI in our New York office, to do the honor of introducing her.
Good evening. It's a great honor to introduce our Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Amor-Motley. Over an acclaimed 30-year political career, Prime Minister Motley has been a trailblazer and inspiration for young people, women, and all Barbadians. She holds the distinction of being the first Attorney General and Minister, the first female Attorney General and Minister of Home Affairs, the first female Minister of Economic Affairs, the first female to lead the Barbados Labour Party, the oldest political organization in the English-speaking Caribbean, and after the last historic election, the first female Prime Minister of Barbados. Since entering elective politics at the age of 26, Prime Minister Motley has demonstrated her unwavering dedication to Barbados and to the improvement of the quality of lives for all Barbadians. She's also proven that she's not just an exceptional leader, but a leader for these trying times. Her hard work, her commitment to excellence, and to always putting Barbados first is testament to her commitment to ensuring that the quality of lives for each and every one of you in this room and all Barbadians remains at the forefront of all of the policies and all of the things that are implemented in Barbados for our respective Barbadians. And she challenges us to always remain committed to doing whatever we can to making Barbados better. As the Prime Minister often says, many hands make light work. And I think that is something that truly inspires us all to continue to work on behalf of Barbados. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to ask you to welcome our Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment, the Minister of National Security and the Civil Service, the Honorable Mia Amor-Motley.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please sit. Have a seat. So Hilary, I single you out because I really didn't expect to see you here, and the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies. If he can stand for a second and let us welcome him. As you know, he's a distinguished Barbadian. And as fate would have it, we are meeting in an educational institution this evening. And distinguished Barbadians all, each and every one of you, by birth, by marriage, by descent, and I say sometimes, regrettably, the most passionate of you by choice. I want to thank you for coming out. I feel as though I owe you an apology before I start, because to have you in this room with this temperature on this day, that may well be your last warm day for summer, I feel as though you are mortgaging part of your health and survival to our nation and our government. And I feel as though I am unfairing you, because I know that I can go home in a week's time and not have to address anybody in a jacket. And that you, unlike me, will now be increasing the weight of your jackets and coats. But that aside, it truly is my pleasure to be here. You know, we had a little meeting before, and I said to them, since 2008, I've been coming here every year virtually, religiously. And yes, it is trite to say that this is the 31st constituency of Barbados. But the truth is that the relationship which you keep in not only your heart, but in your interactions with Barbados is what has made it possible for people to continuously refer to this as the 31st constituency of Barbados. I trust, Hilary, there was a time when people may have said that of London or Reading or different parts of England. But as we all know, in the post-independence environment of our country, this city in particular has taken over as that location where the majority of Barbadians came to pursue a better life for themselves and their families. That technology has allowed you to do that now while retaining constant interaction with your country of birth is having your cake and eating it too. Something that we were told was not possible. And therefore you should count yourselves blessed, because we have a coincidence of interest now that you who have left to make a better life for your families have now the ability to play as critical a role as Barbadian citizens, even though you are not on the rock. And you have a government that recognizes that in very many instances we will only move to the next level if we can leverage all who want to work in the cause of the nation Barbados. And that is why last year when I met you, with you, we announced then the concept of bringing back home to Barbados people from all over the world in the year 2020 to help us perfect a finer vision of where we must go as a nation and a people. And we felt that in almost everything that we confront, scale is always an issue. So that for me to have invited you for just a month or a few weeks would not allow the level of interaction and symbiotic interaction at that we really need at this time, from St. Lucie to St. Philip, from St. John to St. James. And if I leave out St. Michael, I might get voted out of Parliament. But all 11. And as fate would have it, it is almost as if those who were writing their names on history's page as firm craftsmen of our fate in 1966 recognized that we had the bounty of being able to keep with 11 parishes, 12 months of the year, and they set the date of independence. I'm told it's St. Andrew's Day for those who like Scottish history, but set it on the 30th of November, such that in every year we can always claim from the 30th of November to the 31st of December as the day of national collective purpose. And that is what this government has simply done. That in January you start in St. Lucie, and as fate would have it, or divine intervention for those, because there are a lot of people with cloth here this afternoon. And I thank Reverend Scott for her most wonderful prayer. But as fate would have it, January 2020 allows us to celebrate the centenary of the father of our independence, Errol Walton Barrow. And parish by parish by parish we shall move until we end in November, or as Bajans would say, until you come to town in November. And having come to town in November, we reach out to the entire nation from the 30th of November to the 31st of December. Now, many people are asking, what are the activities? Well, the very nature of bottoms-up as opposed to top-down governance means that in choosing to celebrate at the parish level first and foremost, it is not intended for government to direct all activities in the individual parishes. And it is intended that it be a celebration first and foremost of what? Family. The more that I live on this earth, the more that I have the opportunity to be in this job, the more I understand that our ability to keep social cohesion, to have social cohesion, to be able to move to the next level rests upon the family unit, however defined. The traditional family unit, in particular in our context, as the platform for all growth. It is the family that tells that little boy or girl when they're doing wrong or when they're doing right. It is the family that inspires in that little child whether they should be a good cricketer, a good drummer, a good talker, a priest, whatever. Because the morals and the values that you receive, the opportunity to do things that are put before you. There are men today who tell you, I know how to press and cook because my grandmother said no woman is to take advantage of you. A lie? I have a young nephew. Well, not nephew, he's a double first cousin, so you could as well call him that. But I see this little boy at 18 months old drumming. And drumming in a way that got me shame. Because I can't promise to be moving from hi-hats and cymbal and toms and all of that in the way in which he is doing before he can even structure long sentences. Now his father's a musician. So that it is family that first and foremost nurtures us and roots us. But then it is also school. And in our system where we had 200 primary schools in the year 1900, and we have about 80, probably 70 now. Mercifully, most of us received our primary school in the parish in which we were born or raised. And then the secondary schools, there are only about 21 of them. And you in New York, better than most cities, including, in fact, better than Barbados, know it because I think you have more secondary school associations here than we may even have functioning in Barbados. And I'm told now that you're about to have a Princess Margaret one and a St. Lucie secondary one. Is that true?
Yep.
I see people waving at the back.
St. Lucie started last year.
So that celebration locally at the parish level is then further anchored by your church. And more often than not, most people went to church where? In the parish in which they were born or raised. So that I'm taking the time to break it down in this granular fashion because the planning is not simply at government. Government will do its role for signature events in each parish. But the planning is about you reconnecting as a family and as a clan. Now, when we were in London earlier this year, I made the point that if there's one thing we can learn from the Jewish people is what? They never forget who they are and what they're about, and they walk with their God irrespective of where they go and who they marry and what they do. And it has served them well. And why does this matter to us? We live in a world now where resilience, local resilience, is what matters. As we speak, literally, we pray that the next few hours, even at home, with the amount of rain that's falling, does not cause any serious flooding or landslides, as it has already done in Trinidad and Tobago. I think Barataria had some problems today. Tobago had problems. And both Grenada and St. Vincent are now literally under the barrel of Tropical Storm Karen. There's clearly no gender bias in these hurricanes at all. But the resilience that we require is one that your grandparents and my grandparents knew about in terms of how they built and how they were continuously ready because they didn't have this to tell them that a hurricane was coming or a storm was coming. So they didn't have the luxury of getting ready. They had to be what? Be ready. And as we went to the Bahamas, 36 hours after Dorian hit it, and we flew over, it was clear that those houses that were built traditionally on the stilts to allow the storm surge to come through were the ones that were more capable of withstanding what had to be done. Our grandparents did not have the abundance of food that we had. But their resilience, or the money, led them to growing in their backyards and to raising stock. And many people, many Barbadians, were raised having to be part and parcel of that process. Today, there's a wonderful story in the nation today of a lady from St. John who is over 100 years old, born in June 1919. And in that she talks about how her mother would send her out on a weekend to get a whole of potato and different other things in order for them and what they had to do in order to be able to live in those times. That resilience that we need now to survive in today's world, where some may even say that we are seeing apocalyptic events. That resilience comes fundamentally by reconnecting with who we are and the historical journey that we have made to get where we are. And we have to recognize that as a people, we have been blessed in coming from a stock that has never played dead and that has known what it is to fight. So that part of the gathering is to be able to let your children and grandchildren know who they are. And that they didn't just happen to be here, or they're the same as any and everybody. That how we were made up is different. The things that Bajans feel strongly about invariably relate to fairness and social justice and education and land. That's why, small as we are, we can get here and come to the United Nations in 1967 after being independent on the 30th of November. We can tell people, friends of all, satellites of none. Because we're not intimidated. That is why 2 weeks ago in Geneva, I addressed the global community to say, and I will do it again in New York this week, that I do not believe that it is beyond human ingenuity for us to reverse and halt climate change. That if we can find the money and the capacity to develop driverless cars, then we can find the money and the capacity to halt climate change in this global community. So that we have different roles to play. But if we are to ensure that the essence of what Barbadian is about, being Barbadian is about, is to continue in the next generation, in spite of all of the battles to dilute our cultural identity through music, through film, through education, through politics, through everything. The only way we're going to do it is by periodically pausing and having that conversation both at the local level, the family level, the community level, but also at the national level. And without a lot of long talk, that is what we are trying to achieve with the gathering. We have every confidence that there's some of you who, when you come to St. Lucie, who went to St. Lucie Primary School, who went to different primary schools across the parish, who will want to be able to say, I benefited from here, and hence all who come to this school must now benefit. There are some who will want to say the same thing at the Darrell Jordan Secondary School, St. Lucie Secondary School. I know you all really want that organization started. And I must tell you that the steel band that serenaded us on Friday morning as we launched the phase 2 of the Coconut Project with the European Union was, as usual, the St. Lucie Secondary Steel Orchestra that has maintained excellence in its performance across Barbados. So that at the parish level, we anticipate there will be that sense, there will be that rivalry. We will be having a few competitions, the best family homecoming, the best activities. We want to be able to allow the local shops. Because if everybody comes to town, when you're supposed to be in St. Lucie, what's going to happen to the people who are shopkeepers in St. Lucie? Let's get real. So that this is deliberately intended to be parish-focused. And we've done it because when I stood here in this city a year ago, I told you, look, we're going to need some time to stabilize. You remember? We have to stop the bleeding first before you have the operation. And that it was our judgment that we would need roughly just under 2 years to do so. And then we must set about the great path of defining what we want by understanding who we are and what is possible at a local level and at a national level. And I say so, conscious that the leadership which we bring to these issues recognizes that the world in which we live in is changing so rapidly. That we knew climate change was an issue 5-7 years ago, but we never understood that it would consume literally every aspect of our governance. And why? If we have to find money to fight sargassum here, which unlike hurricane is the heart attack, and sargassum is the diabetes. Hurricanes have the ability to knock you down one time. No notice whatsoever, because some of the fit people have been some of the ones who drop dead from heart attacks. But the sargassum is eating away at those businesses and properties and professions on a daily and weekly basis, just like how diabetes eats away at your organs. We didn't know that we would also have to be fighting with a Western world obsession with violence and guns. And when asked what were the two things, and Tony, I'm sure that I would have said this to you both before the elections and since, that the two things that gave me the greatest pause in assuming leadership of our country was one, hurricanes, because irrespective of how much we move to stabilize, all of that can change overnight. And secondly, not just guns, but automatic weapons, because automatic weapons have no margin for error. And when they start to come out, and the numbers that come out in a minute will hurt you, a man might survive a pipe gun or a single shot, but an automatic weapon is a different thing. And in this country, of all countries globally, you see it, regrettably, all too often, with people going about their daily business, becoming victims of all kinds of schizophrenia and psychoses of people who have too easy access to guns. But it isn't only the easy access to guns. It is also the dumbing of our senses of our children, who from 3 and 4 and 5 years old are put in front of these games, bum-da-bum-da-bum-da-bum. And who I swear can get arthritis in the thumbs when they get older. But they're put in front of these things, and they're playing non-stop. And they become accustomed to the notion psychologically that you can kill, go and eat lunch, and come back and live again and kill again. And to believe that you are immortal when guns are around, until they reach the age where they're lining with some older people, get access to a gun, can't even make a proper decision about their lives, but got access to guns to shoot people. Now, this is not a Barbados problem. It is, in part, a global issue. Japan has a high level of penetration of these games, as I was reminded today, but Japan does not have access to the guns. Japanese people don't have access to the guns in the same way. So that is not there. So that when you take into account these new phenomena, the phenomena related to will we be able to feed ourselves if climate events really disrupt transport and logistical supply? Hurricane doesn't have to hit Barbados, it got to hit Miami. Hit Miami, and take out the food supply for the majority of the Caribbean for a week or two minimum. Judgments about what we can tax and how we can tax, all of these are things that we are contending with. But if we are capable of meeting and refining and redefining who we are, and setting for ourselves clear objectives, as we have done as a people, and we've said you don't need to move away from the essence of who we are, we just need to refine it and do better. So that Barbados must have a commitment to be a global influencer. And that is what we've always said, by friends of all, satellites of none. But it predates us even to those who colonized us. So that the Charter of Barbados established precepts that were adopted in this country in the Declaration of Independence 125 years later. Barbados, and so Hilary, we talked about it. I didn't know I was going to see you today, but I asked my team when we were preparing for this week's meetings and speeches to reflect on the fact that we do not talk sufficiently about that part of our history in 1876 with the Confederation riots and the resistance of Crown Colony government when the British wanted to impose Crown Colony government on ourselves, and at the same time that the Parliament was resisting the Crown Colony government, even if the Parliament was not how we wanted it to be comprised, it had already had its first black man in the form of Samuel Jackman Prescott, and the first black Chief Justice was already in place in the form of Conrad Reeves. And what we saw happening was the beginning of what would become the Barbados Mutual, and the resistance to allow indebted plantations to become the subject of multinational takeovers through the form of Tate and Lyle and the different other entities that became dominant in Guyana and Jamaica and other countries in the region. Now I say all of this because this is our DNA. And this desire for us to determine our future and to chart our destiny, to be firm craftsmen of our fate, is not by accident. If it were, every other nation in the region and every other small nation would have the same profile. This is who we are. The first thing you ask a Bajan about somebody and the person in being treated, they say, man, I can't unfair he. Because that word unfair is central to what we care about and who we are as a people. And I'm therefore saying to you, my friends, that if we are to ensure that your children and grandchildren, some of whom are born in this country and across the globe, retain the essence of who they are as Barbadians, to help us fight battles in this world today that we did not expect to have to fight, then you have to help us pause, root them, and to allow the creation of what we set out in 2006 to do, to create global citizens with Barbadian roots, of which Rihanna is perhaps the last and best example of it to the world. That's what Gary Sobers was. That's what Rihanna is. That's what so many of you are at different levels. But if we try to live within 166 square miles with a population that is too small to do what we need to do and to produce what we need to produce, then we shall be victims. But if we become global citizens with Barbadian roots, then we have the ability to help shape and carve the world as we need to see it at this very difficult and turbulent time where bullying is masquerading for legitimate power, and where the failure to recognize that every part matters. Canaries are who send the signal of trouble. The smallest bone is in your ear. Without it, you can't hear. If I was Plastic Bag, I would sing the song that tells you the importance of every part of your body that became famous, perhaps in undermining a previous government. If I sing it, I might want others to associate it with my government, so I'm not going to sing it. Because the country is no longer sick. So that the bottom line is, therefore, that I need us, please. Government can't do this top down. We can send the signal. We can usher people in the direction. But the decision as to whether you want your children and grandchildren to be Bajan to the core, to the bone, as to whether you want and you are proud of the legacy that you already have. It's not perfect. To be proud, it doesn't have to be perfect. But the essence of what matters is what is driving us to fight the battles that we are fighting at the global community level now. the battles that we fought to become independent. That bullying, as I said, must not dominate. That there must be fairness and accountability. There must be opportunity. And that's what we're trying to fight for globally, because without that, what we have will not function and will not work. And without that, the notion of climate refugees, the Caribbean has, the CDB said last week, that if we're not careful, the Caribbean may well become the poorest region in the world by 2050. And I can go into that another time, too long for today. The Caribbean is on the front line of the battle against climate change. The world says we can deal with 2 degrees change, but the Caribbean and the Pacific Islands need 1.5 to survive. So it sounds as though you don't see us, you don't hear us, and we don't matter to you. And it is up to us from wherever we stand to be able to change those dynamics. It is against that background that you heard Jerome speak, therefore, that we are going to claim our Atlantic destiny. And claiming our Atlantic destiny does not in any way compromise our Caribbeanness. Because we have, in fact, embraced the North Atlantic for all of the decades of our independence, because that is where the power of colonization came from, and that is where our wealth was extracted to for centuries. And that Atlantic destiny happens to be on the ascension. 1.2 billion people in Africa. When President Kenyatta met and we left the press conference, when we finished in Barbados, we agreed that when I become chair of CARICOM, hopefully in January, on the eve of the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, that we shall have a CARICOM Africa Summit, because not every country in Africa is a member of the Commonwealth. But the time has come for us to make sure that the bridges and the dollars and the science and the conversation and everything doesn't only go north, but it can go east and come back west to us. So what I've really described to you is a country that is clear about its global obligations as a part of humanity and as a nation of the world. A country that understands its Atlantic destiny based on its Caribbean foundation, because as Machel and Bungie and Skinny Fabulous and all the rest sang this year, we are family, le, le, le. But equally, we are rooted as Barbadian people with Barbadian values, with an understanding that it is only if we are resilient that we can survive on really a rock that is 21 by 14 with very little height to stave off the winds and rain. That mission requires more people to put their shoulders to the plow. And we, for the first time since independence, have established a National Population Commission, because we understand that our numbers are minuscule in comparison to other countries of similar size and of similar punching weight. And if that is to be appreciated, and we are formally awaiting the report very shortly, and in fact they've been working, I think, with the UWI and others in the UN agencies, that who is the first set of people we need to come to and say, look, try and come and put your shoulders to the plow? If it ain't you, I am me. Our first obligation is to Barbadians wherever they are on this earth. And that conversation, therefore, is not only for us to come to you, but for you, therefore, to come home with the gathering, January to November, parish by parish, and from the 30th of November to the 31st of December, the entire island. With respect to how we are doing, we are meeting all of our targets. We are not yet where we want to be, but we are satisfied that if we stay the course, that we shall be referring to these years as historic an event, as I just referred to the Confederation riots or other things that have happened in our past. We are capable of rising above it, but above all else, we are capable of changing the development model, which still too much resembles a colonial expression of political Darwinism and social Darwinism and economic Darwinism, that the fittest among you shall survive, and that it is okay if 20 or 30 or 40% fall off. And we are saying as a government, as children of independence, that this is not what we have come to this moment in time for. That we have to change how we educate our people so that we give the best chance to every one of our children, and not just to a percentage of them, as the British educational policy and reform of the 1940s came to dominate our society and systems. That for us, education must mean maximizing, as we said in 1995 with the white paper, each one matters, maximizing the potential of each and every child. 2, that we must understand that violence is as much a public health disease as anything else, and that this is across the Western world in particular, because of a whole host of things that the Western world has come to value in terms of materialism, in terms of how it treats to liberty and the movement of arms and a whole host of other things. And the desensitizing of our children by the extent to which we are prepared to acknowledge that people can drop dead and move on and talk about it like if nothing happened. That we have equally we are equally changing, having to change how we build and how we do things in our country, because we are facing the existential threat of global civilization in the form of climate change. To do all of these things, my friends, there's an old Barbadian saying that I keep using: as much as many hands make light work. To fight these battles, the old people would tell you, one blow. One blow. And therefore, if we are going to increase the numbers that we need to both stave off the challenges, but to build the platform for prosperity, then your influence on your family and your children and yourself makes that defining difference to the scale of our success. And that is why, in spite of everything else that we have to do, that I insist that we reach out to Barbadians wherever they are, because this is the mission of our people at this time, and not simply of a government. And if you find yourself agreeing with that perspective, then the next time I should be seeing you is in a sunny place without a jacket and with far more pleasantries in the midst. So thank you. Let me hear you this evening, and we look forward to a level of meaningful engagement as we go forward.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Prime Minister wants to hear from you, so we're going to open it up right away to questions. I'm going to try to get another mic. I know Sandra T. Edie is ready, you know. Sandra, hold a sec.
Hold on.
You wanna?
We're going to take the question,
Right.
but I'm going to invite Sir Hilary if he wants to say a few words, because it would be rude of me not to allow really one of our distinguished sons, one of our global citizens with Barbadian roots, to at least have a few minutes. Thank you.
Oops. I think I need some elevation.
You may have to lift it. You too.
Okay. Thank you, Prime Minister. I am let me rephrase that. Maya is my girl. And there's a great background to that comment. 18 years ago, when I was invited to serve as principal of the Cayfield campus, Maya was my minister. And she was largely responsible not only for bringing me home from Jamaica, but also for formulating a vision for our people. And when I returned to Barbados, she called and says, "Come and see me because you need to work out a vision for the Cayfield campus and for the masses of Barbadian people." And we met and had our several conversations, and then we emerged with the concept that the role of the Cayfield campus is to locate within every household in Barbados at least one university graduate. We worked this through because we understood that the best way to lift our people out of poverty is to associate them with more and higher quality education. At the time, I think we had something like 110,000 households. The majority of those households were working class households, working class people like your parents, my parents, who worked on the plantations, and we were the majority. And how best to elevate all of our families than to say every household must have at least, because we know that when a household produces a graduate, it changes the dynamics in that household. I was a working class boy from St. Andrew. In the late 60s, my family split. One half went to Birmingham, England. The other half came to Brooklyn. I came to Brooklyn for 6 months. Glad to be back home. I came to Brooklyn for 6 months of that migration, and then my family said he likes Brooklyn a little too much, and I was sent from Brooklyn to Birmingham, England. But the fact of the matter is, we were, as the Prime Minister said, we were working people looking for a better life and doing what we had to do, because we knew that there was no relationship between your poverty and your intellect. There was no relationship. We are all very bright people because we had a history of survival. And that history has shaped our consciousness. In my own family, I was the fourth of 7 children. I was the first in my family to go to university, ever. I had 3 younger sisters, and I took them with me to college. I took the 3 younger ones with me, and they followed me into college. The 3 older ones felt guilty, and the first of them was living here in Brooklyn on Lefferts Avenue. So he was here on Lefferts Avenue, seeing his younger brothers and sisters in Birmingham, England, go into college, and then he went to college, and then my older sisters. And after all of that, all 7 of us are now graduates. But we believe in sharing our example, and so I said to, at the time, Minister Motley, if we can just situate a graduate in every household and the plantation tenantries and the villages, if we can take the boys off the street, we can take the girls and we can put them into college, it will change the family. And this is why I support so fundamentally what Prime Minister has said, that the family is the organizing unit that will save us. And the families are rooted in parishes, and those parishes constitute our culture and our identity. So I am happy to be here. When I heard that the Prime Minister was going to be in town, I sent her a WhatsApp yesterday to say, I'm coming to hear you. Because I am here because the University of the West Indies was selected 3 months ago by the International Association of Universities. Over 5,000 universities selected UWI to provide leadership on climate smart issues. It's because we have been in this climate changed matter longer than any other university, because we understood 40 years ago what was happening to our coral reefs. We understood 40 years ago the erosion of our beaches. We understood that, and we have been working on that for 40 years. So we were the whistleblowers. And the world have said, UWI was the whistleblower that told the world 40 years ago, we are in danger. And that is why we were selected to lead the world, because of our pedigree. UWI, your university out there. So we were here laying the foundation for the summit. And that is why when I heard that the Prime Minister was going to be here, I know I had to come and say hello, because the 1.5 to stay alive that has been adopted in the Paris Accord is a UWI jingle. We came up with that, 1.5 to stay alive. We came up with that. So I am honored, Prime Minister, that you have asked me to say a few words. I don't know how I'm going to work through your parish concept, because
St. Peter.
I have emerged out of that Boscabel area.
That's August.
Where half of the village is in St. Lucie.
St. Peter.
The other half is in St. Peter. And there are 3 halves, right? And the other half is in Andrew. So in the middle of Boscabel, I have 3 big halves.
And you live in St. James.
And I live in St. James, but I also, born in Rock Hall, St. Andrew. When I walked from Rock Hall down to Black Bess, I crossed the border in St. Peter. So that whole ecosystem, I am now split 4 ways.
So Hilary is like most men I know, want to have their cake and eat it all.
So thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, ministers. Thank you very much. Jerome, my old friend. Thank you, Mr. Bostick. Thank you. And thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Distinguished Barbadian, Sir Hilary Beckles. Okay, we're going to open up the floor. We want you to keep your questions as questions, because the Prime Minister wants to hear from as many people as possible. We're going to ask you to state your name, please. And I know some of you are from far away.
Yeah, that's why I'm first.
Connecticut is right up front.
Yeah.
And we're going to get it on the way.
Okay.
Short and sweet, people. There's a long line already.
Good evening, Honorable Prime Minister, and to the Ministers of Health and Tourism and Foreign Trade. I'm Sandra Tay Eady, Barbadian, left when I was 12, and have been working for Barbados ever since. I am standing here because I think every point that Honorable Prime Minister has hit, and by the way, I'm grateful to have Professor Beckles here as well. Every point that she has hit, those keywords that she is using, themes and family and DNA and rooted, that's something that I have been invested in for a very long time. I'm a family historian. I do Barbados family history. Everybody in here has a story that can empower our children, and our stories matter. It doesn't matter which plantation experience. Our stories are stories of resilience, and our stories are stories of strength, and those stories need to be told. And that's what I do with genealogy. There will be a genealogy workshop on November 23rd, the Macon Library here in Brooklyn. I want all of you to come and overwhelm that space. I also manage and run Facebook pages. St. Joseph Cyber Reunion has about 1,000. I will speak for St. Joseph this evening to say that every household, Professor Beckles, needs a water tank. And that's something we're working on. St. Thomas Cyber Reunion, the Panama Barbados Ancestry Facebook page. Simply Barbados, I'm a regular contributor. There are 30,000 Barbadians on that page. If you have a message for Barbados and you're not on that page, get on that page. Facebook Barbados has 29,000 Barbadians on that page throughout the diaspora and in Barbados. If you're not on that page, you have a message for Barbados, get on that page. Bayesian Descent Network. I speak with Bayesians who were born in Barbados and those who are here in the diaspora on the regular basis about all the topics that you have been mentioning. And last but not least, I am wondering, because Barbados has a 147-year trading colonial history with the Northeast, with New England, I need support from you all, my government, to bring Barbados up to the forefront again in the historical arena. I go to workshops and seminars, and if I'm not there to say Barbados, nobody will remember that Barbados has this relationship and that our diaspora goes into mainstream America in colonial towns like Wethersfield, Connecticut, like Boston, like New York. So I need support from my government to be that voice for Barbados in our historical arena. And for St. Joseph, if you're from St. Joseph, we need all of our households to have a water tank. So instead of consumables like clothes and shoes and stuff, if your family don't have a water tank, help them get a water tank, a pump, and installation. Because with climate change, we're going to need tanks in every household. So one, I need support for the work I've been doing. Two, I need people to recognize that there are internet sites out there where we can have these amazing conversations. And three, yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Good evening, Madam Prime Minister. My name is Wayne Clark, and my dad worked for CLICO for a number of years. So could you speak on the status of CLICO?
If you want me to speak on what? The fact that we've tried to bring this 10-year awful saga to a close, and that effectively that what I inherited was almost $600 million in debt with $60 million in assets to solve it. In spite of that, we've found a way, and I'm happy to report that we are very much in the execution of bringing closure to that. Clearly, there are some niggling ones. I've dealt with one up to today with the issue of a former airline, a set of employees, whether their policies are group or individual, and these are the fine things now that we're working out. But with respect to the $20,000 payment and the different things and the bonds, Cabinet would have agreed, for example, for the establishment of the new bonds to replace the existing bonds that ResLife was holding before. We've paid out at least $67 million thus far in the $20,000 payments. And we will continue to work so that we can bring closure to this. We have now to engage the Eastern Caribbean, because what most of you don't know is that the previous government would also have given commitments without trying to have the parent company in Trinidad take any responsibility, which is now too late to do because it's statute barred, that we are now in the position of having now to sort out the fact that a number of properties are ring-fenced for the benefit of the Eastern Caribbean, even though two of the countries in there would have already sold off assets held by CLICO to be able to satisfy only their countries. So this has been an extremely complex process. It is, I call it the sordid saga of the last decade with CLICO. I regret that the scene of the crime has gone pretty much cold, but having said that, to the extent that we can recover whatever we need to recover, we shall do so, because the taxpayers of Barbados have paid the ultimate price for CLICO's negligence, perfidy, or misdeeds, however which way you want to view it.
Also, could I ask if there's a timeline, and when could he find out if there will be a payment?
We're literally in the process of dealing with everything now. As I said, we've been doing it since June, May, June, and literally it's thousands of people who are affected. In some instances, some people have died already. In other instances, some people have emigrated. In some instances, people have lost their insurance policies. At the end of the day, you've got to be able to prove what is the basis of what you will receive, because it's not a free-for-all. And therefore, that has taken long, but we are getting there. We had hoped that we would complete it by the end of August. We're still in it, but we are satisfied that we can get as close to that as possible in the next few months.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. But if you let me know afterwards, or there's a lady up there with a lot of gray hair, go to her and give her the information, and she will hopefully give me the information so we can follow up specifically for you, because we can look and ask some questions. Thank you, sir.
Madam Prime Minister, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Anthony Linton. I want to ask the question, are guns being manufactured in Barbados? Just want to know, because it seems like every time you look around, there's just like outright mayhem. I mean, from the beginning of the year, 31 people got shot.
No, it has eased up considerably. But we went through the early few months of the year with far more than we would have been happy for. With that, Barbados still has one of the lowest crime rates, if not the lowest in the entire Caribbean.
Well, let's look at Barbados because...
And the lowest murder rate. Now, I say that, however, against the background that too many Caribbean countries rank among the highest in the world with respect to murder rate.
No, Madam Prime Minister, you are to be commended for the great victory that you won. But now you are accountable.
Very
and it just seems that every minute we look around, you know, the response that you give the lowest among the Caribbean, that doesn't satisfy us. Because it seems like our people are being outright murdered and killed, and it doesn't seem to be abating at all. It seems like it's just getting worse and worse.
You didn't strike me as a man who was given to hyperbole when you came to the mic.
And I think that's true.
Having now determined that that may be part of the difficulty, let me help you.
Yes.
One, the guns that we have in Barbados, regrettably, have been coming in over a period of years. The last Attorney General went on the front page with the current Commissioner of Police and complained 3 or 4 years ago about guns coming through the port. I was the most horrified person to find out that not only was nothing done about it, but that more than 94% of the goods coming through the port of Bridgetown came through without scanning. My government, which is accountable, would have then, over the course of the last year, ensured that the Bridgetown port borrowed significant amounts of money to put 2 scanners in place, which are now functioning, and that we continued also to put in place a system for the first time where Customs, the Port Authority, and the police are speaking on an ongoing basis. Now, that you would have thought would have been the most natural response to a former Attorney General and government that was complaining about the number of guns coming through the country. Secondly, we would have also put in place significant sums of money at the end of the last fiscal year and in the beginning of this year, and by fiscal year I mean before March 31st, and this year I mean since April 1, a set of money in order to be able to enhance the technological capacity of the Royal Barbados Police Force that was seeking to fight modern crime with next kin to nothing. Thirdly, that we have also sought to put in place programs, and I'm sorry that Sir Hilary has left us, because on the 26th of July, the day of national significance, when I spoke at Golden Square, I shared with the country for the first time that we are in fact educating at the post-secondary level 7,000 less Barbadians per year than we were educating when we left government in 2007. Between the Polytechnic, the Community College, the University of the West Indies, and Erdiston Teachers Training College. And I have not even talked yet about the abandonment of the mass training that we were doing 5,000 people per year in cultural and sports activities that we were doing across the parishes, nor have I gone to the area of skills training or the vocational training board. The simple point is this, sir, that we regrettably got to a point where in order to spend 68 cents in every dollar servicing debt, it meant that other institutions suffered. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital received $50 million less per year, Jeffrey, than it required. And when you multiply 50 by 10, that is 500 million, almost $500 million in underinvestment. The same can be said for the police force. The senior management and leadership of the Royal Barbados Police Force, half of them were in court for failure to be appropriately recognized and promoted under the course of the last administration in circumstances where the head of the Police Services Commission and other members were mid-level police officers, not ever commissioners, who left in advance of their reaching the height of the force and who were therefore taking decisions about discipline and promotion on people who were their superiors when they functioned in the force, and hence the institutional implosion which we face today. Now, every life that is lost is one too many.
I agree.
But I don't want us to take things out of context. And the bottom line is that even over the course of the last 4 months, 5 months, there has been a significant reduction in the number and the rate at which people were being shot in the country. And why? Because people realize that there are people watching and there are people acting. As we speak, I've just taken the extraordinary act of adding a number of judges, 7 new judges, which carries our complement to over another $1 million in expenditure when the year comes, on just judicial salaries and not other expenditure, such that we will have 5 criminal courts. We inherited 10,000 criminal cases in a backlog. And when I appoint additional judges, then the Judicial Services Commission has now to also appoint additional prosecutors, which is additional money, and then we have to find locations for them to hear. So that, believe you me, when I tell you that my government not only understands that it is accountable, it also insists that we reverse the problem. And we can only reverse it through a multifaceted approach. One, that we continue to have a strong law enforcement posture, both in terms of what comes in at the port. In fact, one of the things that disturbed me greatly was the news that a Bajan at JFK was picked up trying to get a gun out of here into Barbados.
That's right.
2, and you must have been listening this morning to me, because this is exactly one of the topics that I met with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs people about to speak on at the UN, because of the continued liberal approach to the exporting of guns and the manufacturing of guns by those industrial countries that feel that it is more important to make guns than to produce food. 2,
Thank you. Yes, great. Okay.
2, that we have significantly increased the amount of money that we're putting in training, because at the end of the day, what did I say at the beginning of my speech? If you root your children, you teach them right, wrong, and right, there's no other excuse for it, and that you hold them to a line, the chances of them going AWOL and taking up guns at 14, 15, 16, 17 are what? Most who are doing it are as a result of people not rooting them and not taking the kind of care to hold them tight and close. My father used to tell us, if you get locked up with a spliff, don't even call me. That was his attitude. Thirdly, that we are also treating to it from the law enforcement end, because we recognize that if you don't bring people to justice quickly, then people will begin to believe that crime pays. So I thank you for raising it.
Yes, and finally, Prime Minister, one more quick thing. Who's watching the public purse? Who's watching the public purse? That's what we want to know. Who's watching the public purse?
But I'm finished. No,
Because it seems like contracts are going all over the place.
I don't like talking to people's back. Come back, sir. Come back, sir. Yes, I don't like talking to people's backs. Yes, I did not get to the point that in addition to the scanners, we created 138 new posts of customs officers because you had people who were dressed up in customs uniforms but called clerical officers working in customs for over 20 years and nobody taking them on. And then you had a situation where you had no appointed controller of customs since 2006. Now, how do you... I gotta keep looking at you because I want you to appreciate more than anyone else that we are accountable. Yeah, I am. Now, as to who will be accountable for the public purse, we are. And far from that, sir, there is something called the Public Financial Management Act that was passed by our government earlier this year that, in fact, introduces for the first time under the laws of Barbados greater financial accountability from ministers to the public servants to state-owned enterprises, and we will have the midterm review for the very first time in October of this year, totally tracking and accounting where we are. For the first time, we are getting financial data on a daily basis as the government's cash flow. I can tell you that our reserves as of the 19th of September was $1,230 million. I can also tell you what the cash flow situation was, and that we are ahead in every day, literally so far for the month, of where we need to be in terms of our revenue, that our expenditure is slightly under, but that is for other reasons, and we're going to deal with that. I can tell you equally that the Public Financial Management Act holds a level of accountability, not just to us as central government, but to what really was at the core of our fiscal problems. A number of state-owned enterprises that became runaway enterprises, and that some may argue had little or no governance procedures. The Water Authority, the Transport Board, CBC. Up to today, in today's paper, you see the Deputy Commissioner of Police talking about the corruption and infelicities to which the Auditor General referred in taking place, where people were paid the same amount 2 and 3 times for the same work on the same bus. It's called BM 109. I think that was the license plate of the bus, BM 109. And that transmissions being changed in other buses 4 and 5 times within a month, 6 weeks, and 2 months. So that this is the kind of thing that we're dealing with. Now, I have taken the time to go through this because I said in May, and I repeat it, this is no abracadabra moment. We can make it. I started today by telling you that we come from a proud people with deep and great resilience. We can make it. But don't fool yourself in believing that because you want cuckoo, you can do so, and the cuckoo done in 2 minutes. Cuckoo takes time.
Get out those lumps.
You got to stir it. And if you don't do it properly, it can be lumpy. Okay? But fast food, you can drive through and call it and get it as fast as you pay. Barbados is not in a fast food exercise or abracadabra moment. It took 10 years to get us regrettably to this point where we were brought to our knees. I believe that we can get back up much quicker than 10 years. But I'm not going to fool anybody in this room or anybody in Barbados that it can be done in 1 or 2 or even 3 years. It takes time, and we shall do it, and we shall stay the course.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I would like to piggyback on your mention a few minutes ago in terms of the shortfall of the QEH. Minister Bostick, I had a conversation with you last October as part of the Caribbean Nurses Organization at St. Mary's. And so my question is this. Besides the 11 parish event in 2020, can we not challenge each parish to adopt a department or a specialty at the QEH, raise funds during that month, and make those donations to make healthcare services much more accessible and of a higher quality of care. Challenge each parish, adopt a department or specialty, make funds, fundraising during that month, everything goes to the QEH. All of us, when we're going down next year, if we get sick, that's where we're going.
Thank you.
So our priorities need to shift a little bit. I am concerned about the 33 shootings. I'm more concerned with the multiple comorbid mental health problems that affect all of our people in Barbados.
I thank you for that refinement. In fact, the truth is that I focused today on the local issues only because I wanted you all to stay there for now. There are only 2 national projects that we are asking for charitable donations in. One is the hospitals of Barbados, and 2, it is the botanical gardens and beautification of Barbados. Barbados needs to be cleaned up. And the bottom line is that we will do our bit with beautification, but there are a number of people who have lots at home. They're not cleaning them. The neighbors around them are disturbed about the fact that the lots are not being cleaned. We will have to clean and put it onto people's land tax bills if they don't. I hope that we don't have to go there. But also, if we are going to, we need to do more than 1 million. More than 1 million trees must be planted next year by Bajans living at home and Bajans coming home, because that is our contribution to help start to ensure that we don't have the level of greenhouse gases continuing to grow at the rate at which. But what I like is your idea that if we allocate now a department per parish, that will make it even more streamlined. But it won't only be in the QEH, it will also be with the other hospitals, the psychiatric hospital and the geriatric hospital.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, ma'am. Oh, she got hers. That's somebody else's, I suspect. I know.
Good evening. My name is Isabel Albert. I am not a born Barbadian, but I immigrated from St. Lucia since 1972. And my son that born in Barbados is 44 years old.
You don't look as though you got a 44-year-old son.
He's 44 years old. So, and I live in the United States for 22 years. I am just waiting till I turn 62 for me to leave, because everything I own and I dream of is Barbados.
Oh dear.
That's my home.
You saw what I told you about Barbadians by choice?
Yes, that's my home. When I talk about home, I mean Barbados. I went home last month. I just come back the 1st of September. I registered a business because I want to bring some level to Barbados. And 2 questions I have. Is it possible you could bring down the duty?
Let her talk. Judy on what? Don't mind them. You talk to me.
The duty in import, because as a small business, we have to start, and been here for so long, and I just waiting. When I turn 62 today, the next day, once I get that pension, I gone. You know, that's all I'm waiting for. So if you could bring down the duty on import.
Yeah. What's the second question?
The second question is.
I'm going to answer the first, don't mind them.
The second question is on medical. As I say, I've been in Barbados so long. I work in crop. I do everything. I'm in Barbados. That's where I start my life. Now I'm coming back home. Yes, I'm an American citizen. I could always come back if I sick. But being in Barbados on help the economy, I bill and everything in Barbados. You know. If I went there last year and they tell me go to private because the back of my identification card had a number 2.
Yeah. Let me give you some good news first. Our government took the decision that healthcare services have to be made available not just to Barbadian citizens but to residents and immigrants in Barbados, because public health problems does not know parishes, and it does not know nationality. And therefore, we disagree fundamentally with the decision taken by the last government that required persons attending the hospital to have to pay for services. And what was beginning to happen was that you were getting underground development and risk generally that would have put the whole population at risk on 166 square miles. Same thing with education. If you stop people from going to school at primary and secondary level, the worst thing is a bright troublemaker or bright criminal. And that is all that you would breed if you preclude, and you will spend far more in hospitals and jails than you will spend in allowing people access in the first place. With respect to the duties, I want to explain for you very quickly why we've had to take the positions that we take. The last government committed to the dismantling of the duties on our international business sector 6 months before they stopped being the government, or 8 months before. But they never told the country. We therefore were confronted with the reality that if you wanted to keep that sector, we had to bring about convergence of our corporation tax rates. So the taxes that businesses would pay when they make profits. We understood that because we had to converge, either we went high or we went low. If we went high, it meant we would lose all of the international businesses that we had. And quite frankly, international business was responsible for 60% of the country's corporation taxes for the last 30 or so years, 20 years. If we went low, we would lose what local people would have been paying in corporation taxes, but we would remain attractive for companies the world over to want to set up in Barbados and treat Barbados as a domicile. We went low. It also meant that we made significant adjustments to people's income taxes in Barbados. So many of you may not be aware that for the first time ever, people who earn between 15,000 Barbados a year and 25,000 a year literally will get a reverse tax credit for the first time this year to compensate them for the money that they spend in VAT. Right now, people who were earning under 15,000 were getting it, okay? Under 18,000, what am I talking about? Under 18,000, which is $1,500 a month. We also extended and said, look, if you are earning between $2,000 a month and $2,800 a month, we feel that we should remove your liability to pay income taxes. So that for all those people earning under $2,800, even though they're paying monthly taxes, next year, when they file the tax returns, they're going to get back every cent. So it is almost a government meeting turn. That's effectively what it is. So from $2,000, from $1,500 a month, $2,000 a month to $2,800 roughly, $25,000 to $35,000 a year. You do the maths. And then everybody else, we reduced the income taxes. Now, we were forced to have to take these decisions related to earnings because of the commitment given by the last government with respect to the tax thing. So it meant that if you're not taxing income, you've got to now be taxing assets and transactions and imports. And that is why, for the moment, our taxation on land taxes, although we have still protected all of the properties under $450,000, there's been no increase for them, valued under $450,000, which is the majority of people who have now become property owners. And secondly, we've gone after and held a line. We haven't increased import duties, but we've kept them constant. But we can't reduce them at this stage because import duties, excise taxes, land taxes, and VAT have to carry, those four have to carry the weight of what 6 was carrying before. You with me? Okay. Now, because of that, that's why we have increased the disposable income by giving people the income tax benefits. If the economy keeps growing as we want it to and expect it to, it then allows us a little freedom, because you keep hearing me say many hands make light work. If at the end of the day there is more economic activity happening, then that economic activity, when taxed, will give us what we need to do what we have to do. But if it is this amount of people, obviously it will stay higher than if it was this amount of people. So I'm asking you to bear with us for now. The good news is, however, is that by putting more money in people's pockets from July, that just went, and the taxes, income taxes go down again in January, it means that people have more money to decide what they want to buy, even if I can't reduce the import duties for you at this point in time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Sheldine Millington. I have a question about strategic alliance. By the way, my uncle, Dr. Charleston Brathwaite, sends his. Yes. Excuse me. So you've asked us to come to Barbados and be very active in our parish or just getting involved in what is going on in the community. Is there a way, from your perspective, from your vantage point, for businesses, agencies in Barbados to have strategic alliances with agencies and businesses here? For example, is there a way that UWI can have an alliance with Brooklyn College or Kingsborough College or some other college in the United States, so that we share not just technical expertise, but we share from an educational perspective that back and forth? Is there a way that the QEH can have some type of strategic alliance with Brookdale or some other hospital, and through all of these different areas that need work to be done, is there a way to have some type of strategic alliance, not just for people coming to work on a one-to-one level, but at a higher level, so we have that interaction?
Without a doubt, and in fact, the University of the West Indies already has a relationship with SUNY, State University of New York, and they have relationships with other colleges in Canada and the UK and South Africa and China. And that's one of the legacies that Sir Hilary has in UE in terms of taking UE global. So that's there for sure. With respect to the hospital and other institutions, the truth is that there are partnerships that are very quiet in a lot of what we do at home. But I've asked, for example, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital to more appropriately twin with a hospital in the US. The truth is, I think they were looking more at Florida rather than New York, because what we need is not only the benefit of the technological advances, as Jerome and Jeffrey would tell you, but also training and sharing of resources and people. So fully on board with you on that, in that respect. I do feel that in addition to state entities, we also need to see it with the private sector bodies, right, because that's really where you're going to see creativity and the engine of growth. We have just introduced, there are 2 new areas of economic activity in our economy that we expect to see flourish. One is still subject to the regulatory framework, which is before the Joint Select Committee of Parliament, that is medical cannabis, where we want to have an approach that allows us to distinguish ourselves, 1, from the point of view of research, 2, international business, because as you know, Canada is the country with which we have the greatest volume of international business, and if their companies cannot do business in Barbados because medical cannabis is prohibited, we're going to run into some problems and get a big hole with that flow of business. And 3, that we want value added, because unlike sugar that was produced as a bulk commodity for centuries, we feel that if we do medical cannabis, then we should also be able to go right through to pain management and clinics, etc., so that you extract value in terms of the agricultural production, the manufacturing production in terms of oils, and the tourism production in terms of the spa and recuperative health programs. With both of those new sectors, productive sectors, the government has made it clear that we want 30% local participation, so that we are cognizant that while we want these new industries to flourish, we want them and the people coming in to partner with Barbadians in order to be able to give Barbadians an opportunity as well. Now, Barbadians can do it on their own, in which case they can hold 100%, or companies coming in with technological expertise and foreign direct investment can partner with Barbadians. And we're doing that because the strategic partnerships are critical for technological transfer and capital transfer. But secondly, because at the end of the day, we accept that Barbadians are not getting any rate of return for their money in banks. And Barbadians have traditionally only seen savings accounts or the ownership of land as the two ways for creating wealth. But regrettably, our banks are paying interest rates of 0.1%. So it means that you are effectively paying the banks to keep your money in there by the time you add up all the bank charges that you got to pay when the year comes. So we feel that by creating these new opportunities through strategic partnerships, that we can create wealth for Bajans. So you're absolutely correct as to the modality.
Excellent,
Okay?
thank you.
Thank you. I'm told that we have 45 minutes left in this room, Council General. They obviously don't know that Bajans operate at a different level. Let's go.
Good evening, Madam Prime Minister and my fellow Bajans. Good night.
Good night.
First, I want to congratulate you for your winnings.
Thank you.
And I want you to know that we all love you.
Thank you.
I
love
wish,
you all too.
And wish the very best for you. King
you.
Solomon was the most wisest man that ever reigned, and he consulted God. And I pray that you too will not, as you feel or think, I know you're a very highly educated woman and brilliant. I was sitting next to this lady, and I always thought you were Motley's daughter. When I was a little girl in Richmond, staying at my aunt, I heard the neighbors talking how good Motley was. So I said, here comes his daughter, but now I was told that was your grandfather tonight. Yeah. But I want you to know, as the wickedness would increase not only in Barbados, but here in America and all over the land. You have no control over that. But we all will pray. As in 2 Chronicles say, if my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, I'll forgive their sins, and I'll heal their land.
Well said. Thank you, my dear. Yes, sir.
Hello, good evening, good night. My name is Wise Grisette. My question is kind of like anyway, education is important and something that I focus on in my private life and in my business. Specifically focusing on digital education, my question is, what is being done to integrate science, technology, education, arts, and mathematics, aka STEAM, methodology into primary and secondary school education systems in Barbados?
Thank you. The truth is that we're now about to embark on the most ambitious educational reform that our country would ever have sought to look at since independence. And I say so, having served as Minister of Education for 7 years. I was only able to take the country to partial zoning with respect to the transition from primary to secondary. The Minister of Education has now been tasked with leading the reform of the Common Entrance exam, because we believe that it is criminal to be able to park on the sidelines of the nation young people at 10, 11, and 12 years old even before they begin to understand who they are or what they like or what they're good at. And therefore, we have to be able to structure an educational system that first and foremost diagnoses what the difficulties may be in every child's ability to learn, and two, be able to cater, and I'm looking at somebody who can speak to these issues far more than me, but to be able to cater to the deficiencies, whether those deficiencies are genuine learning deficiencies or environmental or out of the home because of disruption. One of the things that was dismantled, which we put in place when I was Minister of Education, and I'm hoping that we will have the money to reintroduce it, plus capacity, which is the testing of every 3- and 5-year-old for hearing, speech, and sight, because that allowed us to know genuinely who were suffering from physical problems but presenting in behavior issues. And we believe that if we can do those things while at the same time equipping our schools such that each school in Barbados is a top school. One is a top school in maths, one is a top school in science, one is a top school in languages, one is a top school in commercial studies, one is a top school in technology, one is a top school in vocational studies, one is a top school in mechanics and engines and engineering. So that every school from St. Lucie to St. Philip, from St. John to St. James, across the entire country, has to become a top school, because I want to be the first to tell you, if you did not know this, that our schools do not now give a certificate in pleasantness and in smiling. Don't give a certificate in being pleasant or in smiling. But yet, what do we need more than ever in our largest productive sector called tourism? You need people who are pleasant and who can smile. So you begin to see the disconnect between what and who we are building for and what we need. Now, I'm saying that because we would want that child who could be the most pleasant, who literally will keep a small hotel going because they're at the front desk and dealing with everybody coming in, and the tourists and the workers, and whatever else happens, they got a pep in the step and a smiling. And then you ask them how much certificates they got, and then the one fade away. Or worse still, if they're a little older, you would hear in the city, don't ask because they can't dance. And you know what the can't dance is? I learned as a young child, because that's really how old I was when I became a politician, that can't dance means can't read and write. Billy Miller used to tell me that all the time. So that we have not yet created a school system that is structured to bring out the best in our citizens and to allow them to pursue the best that they can be. And all I'm saying is that what we have, we inherited from the British educational reform initiatives of the 1940s. When I was in the ministry, I started the changing with the diagnostic approach to testing, with the whole question of the criterion reference test, which regrettably is not being used in the way in which we intended to use it. A child should go from primary to secondary with a portfolio of what it is good at, what it is not good at, where the deficiencies are, where the strengths are, so that that first form teacher can, in fact, literally start where that child is, rather than having to learn from scratch what that child good at and what that child not good at. Okay? So Jerome is also reminding me that the whole capacity to be multilingual, and remember in the manifesto we said that we want by 2030 for all children under 18 to be able to be a few things. One, to be able to speak more than one language, and I don't mean Bajan and English, although that is important too. Two, to be able to swim, because you must not be constrained literally or metaphorically by the boundaries that exist on an island. Thirdly and fourthly, to be exposed to sports and artistic discipline because you must learn how to be a team player and you must learn how to care about others and have empathy. And fifthly, that if you don't learn fast and you didn't know it, nobody owes us a living, so you must know how to make money and how to take risks, entrepreneurship. Because that's the only way we're going to survive in this world. So if we start from that as the blueprint of what we want our citizens to look like in 2030, you begin to understand what Santia's mission is as Minister of Education and Romel's mission as Parasec to be able to help us create that kind of thing. Now, the one thing I did learn as Minister of Education is that educational reform is not achieved in electoral cycles. Education reform is not achieved in abracadabra moments. You have to stay the course. And that in truth and in fact, you need 10 years, in my view, of consistent application of the reform mechanisms for it to become the norm. Now, we started the training of early childhood and also special needs with Mount St. Vincent. What we did not do, which we were supposed to have done, is to undertake the most massive retraining of our teachers. Now, we've gone further because we have now launched a national training initiative where we say we don't only want teachers, we want everybody in Barbados to be retrained over the next 4 years. Why? Because we must define excellence, we must train to excellence, we must certify to excellence if we can certify, and we must monitor the habit of excellence. Because you and I and all of us in here know, and we are old enough to have the difficult conversations, that there are things that we should be and could be doing better as a people and as a nation, sector by sector by sector. But the only way we are going to do it is not by pointing fingers, but by beginning to ask ourselves, what does excellence look like in what I am doing, and how can I perform to excellence? Can I be trained to excellence? Can I be certified to it? So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, distinguished panel. My name's Sharon Carter, and both of my parents are Bajan. I was born in New York. My family's planning a big reunion in Barbados next year for the gathering. We're expecting over 200 people from United States, Canada, and England. And we're planning a week-long of activities. And my question is—
Which parish?
We're from St. George, but our grandfather's from St. Philip, so it's in July.
So double.
Yeah. So my question is, are there any special incentives for families coming back in large quantities?
Yeah. Jerome warned me.
Yes.
The truth is that we are in discussions with the airlines now, trying to see what we can do, both in terms of additional air flight, because that's the first thing we need is capacity.
Right.
And once you have numbers also helps influence pricing. So they're very much aware that this initiative that we see on these posters is a critical part. I also know that the BTMI has been putting together a package for things that friends and family that will make it even more attractive once you're on the ground and for the kinds of things, because it can be expensive to do things in large numbers, as we all know, which is why very often people don't necessarily travel as families. So we are trying to do those things, and I hope that the Minister of Tourism and the Director of Tourism here will be in a position— where's UC who introduced me? You see, you all will be in a position soon to advise those in the USA what those measures will be, correct?
Okay, thank you.
But if you go to him—
Yes, go to him. All right.
I can't send you to the lady with gray hair, send the guy without hair.
Good evening, Prime Minister, Minister Wolcott, Minister Bostick. My name is Peggy Cheltenham, and I have a vexing problem. The last administration entered into a bilateral agreement with the United States government that is affecting persons that worked in Barbados before they came here, and now they're effectively lessening their national insurance pension. And for example, if I go at 67, then NIS is going to ask me, are you getting any pension from anywhere else? When you go for your Social Security, they're asking you, are you getting any pension from anywhere else? So instead of getting 100% from Barbados that you worked and contributed to, you did want to combine it till you get 100% total, which don't make no sense. My question to you is, we discussed this when you were leader of the opposition. We spoke a couple of years ago. And my question to you now as Prime Minister is how soon you could finish with this?
I would like you to tell me how soon we will have somebody here that will listen to us. It takes two hands to clap. And the truth is that it is a matter that the Ministry of Finance has indicated is a priority issue. I've had to intervene, as you know, at home with another similar one with abatement, with disability benefits and pensions, because in many instances what was happening in that instance, and I'm not sure about here, was not intended for persons to get beyond a certain point. In the one at home, in some instances, people ended up earning more than they were earning in their salary, but between the disability benefit and the pension, they get more. These Social Security agreements that we have take long to negotiate. And the last government obviously would have taken decisions, I'm not sure. I fully anticipate that you have to have first the interest and attention. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs will tell you that the greatest attention here in the last 9 months really has been on the issue of Venezuela and not on Social Security. So I don't want to mamagai you, and I don't want to fool you.
Okay.
But we have to have equal attention paid on both sides to the matter. But we hear you, and it is an issue that we will continue to argue for and fight for.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Okay?
Yeah.
You may want, Peggy, also, it's good to see you, you may want also to liaise with Jerome directly on it. Thank you.
Good evening, Prime Minister. Oh, sorry. I'll wait. Oh, good evening, Prime Minister, ministers. My question, let me see. I'm a first-generation Barbadian American of 2 Bajan-born and raised parents. It saddened me recently to learn that my child can never attain Bajan citizenship by descent, even though we eat, sleep, and breathe Barbados in my household.
I can pause you given the lateness of the hour. The Cabinet has already basically taken a policy decision that is the subject now of preparatory work by the Ministry of Home Affairs.
Okay.
That we believe that citizenship by descent should extend beyond 1 generation.
Thank you.
And that the most natural unit of the family is grandparents, children, and grandchildren.
Yes.
And that is the basic unit that all of us are accustomed to for the most part. So we expect that there will be a new immigration bill probably by early next year. The truth is that stabilizing the economy has meant that we've had to focus more on economic legislation for the most part, but we anticipate that the new immigration bill will be ready by early in the new year.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Prime Minister.
Good evening, Prime Minister Mia Motley, and to your distinguished panel. My name is Ingrid, and this is my daughter, Charlene. And I have one question. I know you want us to come back for 2020, but I've been going back at least once or twice a year. And I built my home there. I've been living here over 40-something years. And I built my home in Barbados, and I built it the old-fashioned way. By just budgeting and fixing and
not owing nobody.
And that's it. I didn't go to the banks. But, you know, but the one thing I went home this year to pay my land tax, and it's pretty hefty, but what I was told by St. James was to go to town, to that blue building, I think it's called the land taxes area. And I was told that for me to really get a credit to really bring it down, I would have to spend at least 180 days in Barbados. But I'm working still, And that allows me, when I come back here, to make more money, to pay my
that's not
everything. So I don't know if I'm getting the right information.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting the right information because land taxes have nothing to do with domicile. And from the minute you said 180 days, you're talking to me as to whether you're tax resident or not. And if you domicile and tax resident. But land taxes don't have anything to do with that. So what I'd like you to do is give us your information, because the one thing you will get with land taxes is a discount for early payment. It used to be 5 and 10%. We reduced it to 5% this year because the truth is, as you know, we're trying to bring the country out of recession.
Yes.
And what we've tried to do is to share the burden equally between workers, capital, bankers, insurance companies, individuals, government. Previously, the workers who carried all of the burden. So again, an economic problem, send home 5,000 people. We said, no, everybody's going to share. I explained to the lady earlier why we had to put more burden on land tax, imports, excise, VAT, because of what has happened with increasing disposable income on income taxes and corporation taxes. But 180 days has nothing at all to do with land taxes, nothing. So I thought you were about to tell me that you wanted the ability to pay your land taxes online so that you could get the 5% discount.
I always pay before time.
Right.
But this is what I was told by the personnel in the office.
For some people, it's difficult being overseas, to pay beforehand unless you have somebody who's going to carry it in for you.
I usually go in and pay it myself.
Right, but you're lucky. What we've done now, and in fact, I think the Easy Pay system was launched on Friday, 2 days ago. But why we're working is for you to be able to pay certain things online, so that whether you're in Timbuktu, or you in St. Thomas, or you in New York, you should be able to pay certain things to keep yourself in order without having to face the risk of penalty or interest.
And we need to get the water company to get online also, because the water authority,
That's right.
because they're
trying to
not.
get all of them online.
Yes, but
all of the services, we indicated in the budget this year that over the course of the next 18 months, that is what we expect to happen, department by department by department.
Okay, thank you so much. My daughter will like that.
Yes.
I just wanted to know about the garbage because it was 1 day a week, and we missed that 1 day, and it was horrific. It was really tragic. Like, we were with a lot of garbage there. They only come 1 day a week in that area.
And bear with us for now. The trucks, we've got 7 new trucks. There are 12 more on the way. The bottom line is that the last government did not buy a single bus or a single garbage truck. And they hardly bought any equipment, I think, for MTW as well. So we've had to come in and literally look for money first at a time when the country had no money to be able to buy these trucks. And what we discovered is that you can't go on the shelf. I could go on the shelf and buy a coat. I could go on the shelf and buy a phone. But because companies don't keep inventory anymore in a post-2008 world, it means that whatever you're ordering, a heavy piece of equipment or a bus or a truck, you've got to wait 6 to 9 months for delivery. So we've gotten 7 of the garbage trucks. There are another 12 garbage trucks that are due anytime between October, November, December, somewhere around there. Similarly with the buses, we're doing the same thing. So hopefully by the time you come, the garbage truck situation for the gathering will be significantly better. And because we don't have the kind of, we ain't washed away with money, as the old people would say, when we go again next year, we're going to look to buy another 10 or 12 again next year. So, and by that, within 3 years of being in government, we will have literally finished the total fleet replacement, because Barbados needs about 35 trucks to cover the whole island efficiently to give you the kind of service that you want. But we're also about to ask people to change how they accumulate garbage. And the recycling and the composting is a critical component. And as you know, we would have taken a decision to ban single-use plastics earlier this year as well, because we cannot live in this world and be generating garbage in the way in which we do without reference to the consequences of it, both in terms of solid and liquid, disposal of solid and liquid waste. Okay?
Okay.
So we're
Is
going
it
to work
possible
together.
for
And
me to
some of you
get-
have experience in these
Is
issues
it
too.
possible for me to get a picture? I want proof.
No problem, Alice. No problem. You can do that while I talk. Listen to this other gentleman.
Honorable Prime Minister, Ministers, Council General, good evening. I'm Trevor Messiah, and I recently found out that the price of a LIAT ticket from Barbados to Trinidad is well over $1,000, actually $1,200 to be exact. I was invited to invest in a ferry service from Barbados, St. Vincent to Grenada, later to have Barbados, St. Vincent, Trinidad. Now, is Barbados ready for such a service? And seeing that it's going to have to be customs and immigration, and if they aren't, how long would it take for Barbados to prepare for such a service?
You obviously read the editorial in The Nation today.
No, I didn't.
Mr. Best will tell you that today's Nation editorial validated my announcement and support for the fact that we need an inter-island ferry service, a sea bridge as I call it, as a matter of urgency. And those who know me, I've been speaking to a single domestic space in telecommunications and a single domestic space in transport. Because unless we build these air and sea bridges, and unless we build the bridges for telecoms and information, we're not going to have the kind of economic activity that we would otherwise spawn. I support ferries because it has been shown, for example, between Trinidad and Tobago, that sea bridge, that ferry service between the two, that now has over 1.2 million passengers a year, having started at about less than 100,000. And Trinidad's population is just over 1 million, and Tobago's is 60,000. So how do you have that volume of traffic moving unless you spawn new categories of travelers? Children, school children now travel once there's a ferry service. Sporting teams now travel once there's a ferry service. Congregations and other types of groups travel. So that it opens up mass-based travel in a way that doesn't happen with air travel.
Excellent. So my question was, how soon can Barbados be ready?
It's not Barbados alone, Mr. Messiah, but Barbados is taking the initiative. And in fact, I asked the Attorney General to be responsible for the engagement with the other governments, because what you need is mutual recognition of insurance, mutual recognition to be able to move cars that, for example, can be roll on, roll off. In terms of if those things are not included and it's just a question of facilitating berthing, then we're ready tomorrow. But if you want to move cargo and cars, you need a little more, and that's what the AG is working towards now. And that's what we're also looking at with other private investors, because it's not going to be sustainable on the movement of people alone. And that's what Trinidad One showed as well. You need cargo and people and vehicles, all three, in order to make it viable.
Thank you.
So come and talk to us. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Madam Prime Minister. My name is Verna Barnett, and my question has to do with infrastructure, especially in what I call the community hotels, the hotels that are not along the beachfront, but the ones that are in various parishes, since all of the parishes are going to be involved in accommodating a huge amount of people next year. And my question is coming because in 2018 I was there. I stayed in a hotel in St. Philip. I was there planning an event, and a very small thing, which was a water main break in front of the hotel, forced me to have to replan everything and have a reception somewhere else and have families stay somewhere else. So with so many people coming next year to different parishes, like the rural parishes like St. John, St. Philip, is the Board of Tourism prepared to accommodate huge amounts of people like we had a woman earlier who talked about bringing 200 people. obviously, not everyone will fit into other people's homes. So is the Board of Tourism prepared to deal with infrastructure problems? And one thing I'd like to suggest is that every small hotel like that, like the one in St. Philip, should have two things. One is a water facility on the premises, a water tank, basically, and the other is to have a generator in case of electricity going out, because those two things can really ruin a person's stay on the island.
Agreed. In fact, more than a generator, what we've been trying to encourage the tourism, indigenous properties to have is to convert to renewable energy. And to be able, therefore, to be able to power their establishment through renewable energy. With respect to the water tanks, I announced in the budget not only hotels, but that all properties over 1,000 square foot in Barbados should now invest in a potable water tank. Because whether we like it or not, and I want to put it in context, those who haven't done it, go on YouTube and look for a documentary on the groundwater crisis. And you'll see them speaking about the groundwater crisis in Peru, in Morocco, in Kansas and South Dakota in this country because of the reservoirs where the salinity is being experienced, brackish and salty water, largely because you're extracting water at a faster rate than the things are being replenished. And Morocco. And the bottom line is Barbados is no different. And that is one of the regrettable consequences of global warming that we're also facing. So as a government, in March of this year in the budget, we said, look, we need to get everybody to be able to move. And that's why it was Sandy, right, who spoke about the water tanks program. That's a wonderful idea because every household really needs to have their own water tank for the new world in which we live. Far less hotels and guest houses. So entirely in agreement with you. We've asked the Water Authority to set up also a division that will allow them to help finance water tanks and water-saving devices, because if you keep using the old-time toilets, you're going to waste 4 or 5 gallons of water per flush. And when you multiply that by each person in each household, you can understand that if you move to a water-saving device that is 1.5 gallons instead, how many gallons per day you're in fact saving per household, and how people's water bills can in fact be reduced. And even with all of that, the only country that has cheaper water rates in the Caribbean than Barbados, residentially and commercially combined, is Trinidad. And that's because their cost of energy. In spite of us being a water-scarce country, we pay less than almost every other.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Prime Minister, distinguished panel, ladies and gentlemen, good night. Madam Prime Minister, my concern, let me first say that you're doing a wonderful job.
Thank you,
and
sir.
I commend you for a job well done. Next to you is a CG. He's doing a fantastic job. Working Towers Vision 2020.
Thank you. On his behalf, too. Go ahead.
I speak for many people. This is a good man. There's a lot of people who say they're BLP supporters, and they're trying to derail this man from his vision and working towards that vision. This man is working daily, weekly, monthly, trying to push this thing forward, and the people who said they are BLP supporters are trying to derail this man from doing his job. What bothers me most is that these people are supposed to be a group that's supposed to be supportive of the Barbados Labour Party.
I think you want to talk to the General Secretary, not me.
Yeah. All right. So
I assume that there's so much red in this room that you are only seeing red, but I have to see red, yellow, and blue.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but
I have to see red, yellow, and blue.
Yeah, all right.
With all due respect, sir.
Yeah, all right.
Even my scarf has in blue.
But you're doing a wonderful job.
Thank you.
And the CG is doing a wonderful job. So let's continue to support him. All right.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Prime Minister, thank you for being here. My name is Dr. Judy Newton, and on March the 29th of this year, I flew to Barbados to eulogize my first cousin who was brutally murdered as a consequence of being stabbed approximately 47 times. It's quite unnerving. And to know that these crimes are occurring in Barbados. My 90-year-old mother lives there. I'm concerned about my mother and the rest of my family. I would like to know, I spoke to the station sergeant, and there was very limited communication between our collaboration between the family and the station sergeant who is in charge of the homicide. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on how these homicides are being enhanced, please?
I think you mean in terms of how we're dealing with them. The bottom line is I don't know the factual circumstances, but I'd like first to extend my sympathy to you.
Thank you.
And what you had to endure. As I said earlier, every murder is one too many. But I need to put it in context. And difficult conversations have to be had by people who are adults. And Barbados is an adult. We are 53 years old as a nation. I said earlier that we need to retrain to excellence in every area and not just in teaching. And it is because sometimes we do not treat one another in as fair or as comprehensive a manner as we should do. And that is either because people are either not trained to do so, or they have not had the experience and they are not being required to do so. There is no excuse for a family not being told as much as they can be told about the circumstances of the loss of any life, whether through homicide, natural causes, accidents, or whatever. So we start from that premise. And if you feel that there are things that your family needs to know, then we will facilitate it through the Royal Barbados Police Force being able to engage with the family, and I apologize to the extent if that is the case. With respect to your concerns and fears, look, it is always more difficult to deal with something when you are thousands of miles away. If I heard, tonight I hear with y'all, but I really ain't here, you know, because I worrying about the rain at home. And I probably am worrying more than people who are at home because I am not home tonight. And therefore, distance has a way of increasing one's sense of fear. And that's why I wasn't being unfair to the gentleman at the beginning. But I also want us not to take things out of context, because Jamaica has probably 1,700 murders a year now. Trinidad has, what, 400, 500? I can't remember the exact number. St. Kitts has 41. But St. Kitts only has 38,000 people. So that St. Kitts has a higher murder rate than probably even Trinidad or Jamaica, depending on the year that you take it. St. Lucia has a higher murder rate than Barbados. But that doesn't help anybody to feel better, because one murder is one too many. The chances of you being knocked down, and this is the point Jeffrey was making, you know, the chances of people being knocked down by heart attack and diabetes are far, 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 far greater in Barbados than of any violent attack. But yet we are jarred into action by that kind of violence, but we're not jarred into action by the daily violence to our bodies that chronic NCDs are doing. So it's a conversation that we have to have. The fact that we have more guns than we've ever had is disturbing to me. But the fact that we're taking the actions to reduce the number of guns and to hold people. We made amendments to the law, I forgot to tell you earlier, to the bail, such that you're not going to get bail for murder in under 18 months or 2 years. That basically you have to stay in there and let us get the cases, and that's why we put the additional judges in place, so you can have hearings within the first 6 to 9 months of a person being charged for murder. These things are not easy. But we never lived in a world where we saw people being killed in mass numbers in mosques or shopping malls, as we are now seeing in the world. And regrettably, that access to weapons and to a form of violence that is tolerated by media, movies, and games dumbs people's horror, desensitizes people almost from the horror of loss of life from that kind of violence. And that's the world in which we live, and that's why rooting our children in the families, understanding the benefit of prayer and religion and moral compass is absolutely critical if we are to minimize and reduce other families from having to go through the horror which you have had to go through. And once again, our thoughts and our sympathy are with you, but I have every confidence that all will be well. And I leave it at that. All will be well. I think we've gotten here at a point where we can start to pull back and start to tell people, take responsibility for your actions, whether you are young or old, and let us work together, because they have to know right from wrong. Right is right and wrong is wrong, and there's no other way to put it. Okay, but on your matter, particularly with the police, if you can, I don't know where Jessica is, find her and let her take your information, or the lady there with the head covered, my permanent secretary, give her the information and she can make sure that the police give you the kind of report that the family needs to get. Okay? Thank you. Thank you. She's over there. All right. Thanks.
Well, Madam Prime Minister, Ministers of Government, Council General, it's always a pleasure to be in your presence. I am from Green, St. George. I'm the mayor of the great city of Plainfield, New Jersey.
Yep.
I have two quick questions. In light of the recent devastation that was visited upon the islands of the Bahamas, is Barbados taking a look at its building codes to ensure the structural integrity of existing buildings as well as new construction?
Even before the Bahamas, if you look at our manifesto, you will see that we committed in the manifesto to a program called Roofs to Reefs. And we committed that that would be the major transformative project of our government, because we recognize that you will either pay for a disaster before or after. Now, most young people in here will not know that this weekend is the anniversary of Hurricane Janet. And most young people in here will not know that after Hurricane Janet hit Barbados, and in particular the South, and I am talking from hearsay too, that there were not enough carpenters in the country, I'm told, and they therefore developed a new creature called a storm carpenter, because you had to get people housed again. And because the storm carpenters could not handle the physics of the gable roof and the truss and the hip roof, that we then got these flat roofs that we all see all over Barbados, and almost every single house in Barbados has these, Chattel House has these flat roofs, which quite frankly many have large overhangs, and the roofs will peel, as I saw happen in other parts of the world with hurricanes. We have therefore started in a modest way, even while we plan out the major project for funding from the Green Climate Fund, and Jerome was at the meetings today, and a number of countries between today and tomorrow are significantly increasing their contributions to the Green Climate Fund, because we understand that climate change is real.
It is.
And not speculative as others may want us to believe. But As a result of that, without prejudice to what the Urban and the Rural Development Commission has been starting to do in trying to change out roofs, we realize that almost every chattel house in Barbados built to the same design. You ever check it? And that is because that design basically was drawn out on the back of an embassy box or a matchbox. And tradesmen were trained to build to it. So what we have done as a cabinet is that we have agreed that the Ministry of Housing and the Ministry of Public Works and Maintenance, in fact, so urgent was it and so little time did we have for it that I agreed that I would meet with them on my birthday on the 1st of October, the architects and engineers and construction-related professions, because we need to be able to come up with a new 3 or 4 house designs and train people to it to make sure that the average tradesman in Barbados is changing how he builds to make sure that what we have is sustainable. Secondly, that we encourage existing households that have the flat roof to use the straps or to cut the overhang or to change the roof if they can afford to do it, and we're therefore looking at funding mechanisms for that too, so that over the course, and it's going to take time because we did this between 1955 and now. That was 65 years, you could have become a pensioner and all. And we need to change it over the next decade because of climate change. And you heard me talk about earlier about the resilience throughout the region on stilts, etc. The problem with the traditional building code in a traditional way is that you can literally have a bureaucratic blockage. And therefore what the government has said to the Ministry of Public Works and Maintenance is that those people who are certified to deliver services have a role to play in certifying that what they are building is in accordance with these specifications, and that government's role is to audit and inspect periodically, not everybody, but if you mash the crease, you mash the crease, you're going to pay the price. So just as the Customs Department is about to implement a trusted trader program, where people who are custom importing all the time as large enterprises will be given certain fast-track privileges then. And if we find that you abuse it, you get a warning letter. And if you abuse it the second time, downtown a brush. You're gone. You understand? So that is exactly what, if we don't do it that way, then you will find that Barbados will have a list so long, just almost like with the government electrical department, except worse then, with people waiting for certifications in order to get it done. But we have to train the tradesmen, and in training the tradesmen, we're going to come up with a few designs for people who can't afford to go on their own and hire architects or draftsmen, and who therefore the tradesmen are billing to specific dimensions for them. Okay, so we all, if you can come and help us, sir, we'll be more than happy.
Well, thank you.
But clearly you are experiencing some electoral and other success in New Jersey, and we will continue to wish you all the very best, because we're proud of what you are achieving as well.
Thank you so very much. And my final question, you inherited a nation on the brink of financial disaster. At least that's how I see it. Mm-hmm. So given the level of corruption that was apparent in the last government, was there any consideration given to the creation of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that would look at the mismanagement, misappropriation, and misdeeds of former ministers, not for the purpose of apportioning punishment, but for sort of bringing people together and to get at the facts so that we wouldn't repeat those mistakes of the past?
You obviously belong in my head. Look, it has been one of the most difficult things for me to negotiate, because at a very personal level, I've always told people I am a New Testament girl. I'm not an Old Testament girl. And tonight you were reminded what my name stands for. And I've discussed it with the Attorney General and members of Cabinet and others. And we are not going to sweep wrongdoing under the carpet. But we are going to bring legislation, and it's taken a little longer to draft than I would have hoped for because we're drafting it from scratch. There's no precedent for it. But we believe that people, and Barbados is not the size of South Africa, so smallness matters. We believe that we have to find a mechanism for those who want to say, look, I know I did ignorance. I'm sorry. And let us agree what kind of penalty or what kind of reprimand is appropriate, whether at the corporate level or whether at the individual level. But if we tried to exact vengeance, knowing full well that in Romans, the Bible says what? Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And knowing full well that in a small society, it is likely to shut down all forms of relationships and conduct of business, you could find the society being dragged back in to a lack of economic activity while you are seeking to be focused exclusively on vengeance. Now, what we are doing is trying to govern for what might be the worst government in the future again, by putting systems in place to ensure that there is no recurrence of that kind of corruption, rather than simply seeking to exact vengeance in the past. So my ministers will have to adhere to a level that no other previous minister in Barbados would have had to adhere to. We extracted from them commitments on declaration of assets, even though the Integrity Commission is not fully in place, and I anticipate that when Parliament resumes in October, the Joint Select Committee can report back to the House of Assembly on the Integrity Commission, such that I hope by the next fiscal year we can have the Integrity Commission operational. But in spite of that, I insisted that everyone who wanted to serve as a cabinet minister submit a declaration of assets to the cabinet secretary in a sealed envelope. Secondly, my government has put in place $1 million to start for the establishment this year, and the legislation should come sometime in October or November. And that's why I tell you that we are a mill to producing the level of legislation that we are, but a legislation for the creation of an agency that we call, for short, MOCACA, which is the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency of Barbados, which will be a separate entity from the police and from the other agencies, the Financial Intelligence Unit, etc., because they must come to work every day, even if coordinating the multiple agencies as well as the private sector forensic accounting and auditing help that you need in order to fight corruption, to fight major organized crime, and to fight terrorism. And that agency, MOCACA, once the legislative framework is put in place, will help us to do that. So serious are we about it that we have engaged the former Chief of Staff of the Barbados Defense Force, Colonel Quinton, to help us get the agency operational. So what I say to you, therefore, the Performance Financial Management Act that I referred to the gentleman to, that we now have governing the Public Financial Management Act that now governs the affairs of our public finances, is also breaking completely new ground, not just in Barbados, but across the developing world with respect to financial accountability. So let us govern for the future. Let us remember the misdeeds of the past and hold people accountable for them. But let us not believe that there is only one way to hold people accountable. Now, that may not mean that the courts may not say to one or two people that your behaviors have been so egregious, X, Y, Z. But the scale of the corruption and the scale of the misdeeds is such that if we were to focus our attention on getting to all of it, we would have no energy left to building out in New Barbados. And we have not been elected to be prosecutors. We have been elected to lead this country to be the best that it can be.
Well, thank you, Madam Prime Minister.
Thank you. Am I allowed? Hi, good evening all. My name is Barbara McMillan. And I have a warning and I have a statement to make. Hopefully it'll be okay. I don't mean to insult anyone, but you have to be careful with China. You know, they're not in love with the black world. They come in with their money, buying up anything they want to. You have to be so careful, no?
Fret not thyself. I know that as a lady like you, I know that a lady like you would be accustomed to people giving you all kinds of flattering entreaties, but that does not stop you from being rooted. And equally, our country will engage, and that's what Mr. Barr said in '66, and it has endured across every government. I would like to think, even though it was tested at its most in the last 10 years.
Because I've seen things, you know, but anyway, just be careful, very careful. Very careful. They're not coming to Barbados because they're in love with us. They're coming with their power and their money. You know
I think
that.
that regrettably is a factor of this world.
Yes.
That bullying dominates where before.
Money. You don't have the money to do things, and this is, oh yes, I can do it for you. Oh really? There's a lot attached to that. Anyway, I'll move on. My son was in Barbados with me as he loves Barbados dearly. He's disabled, sadly.
Sorry to hear.
And the roads are not really ready for his scooter or his walker. They'll let you up, but then where does he get off?
We're working on it. That's the truth.
It was horrible.
We're working on it, but remember, once again, I didn't say, when I talked about no vehicles being bought for 10 years, I also talked about no equipment for MTW virtually being bought. And the bottom line is that there was no road repairs in Barbados for how long?
The infrastructure is
at least for
unbelievable.
4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So the infrastructure of the country, and I haven't even talked about the water
They'll
pipes.
give you cross path. They'll give you a crossing, but for whom?
No, we're
And how is he gonna get
concentrating
on the other
actually
one?
on the main thoroughfares.
Yeah.
Bridgetown, Oystons, Spitestown. So that what I've said to them is that you just need a space, like a gentle, gradual ramp.
Yes,
so that,
on both ends. But if you
both sides.
Yes, if you get down here or get up here, you need the same thing at the other end.
Point well made. And
yes.
Look, you know what the genius of Rihanna is?
What?
How many of you have seen Rihanna's fashion show that came out on Amazon 2 nights ago?
Oh no, I didn't see it yet.
Rihanna, when I talk about global citizen,
Yes.
Barbadian roots, the one thing that has distinguished Rihanna as an entrepreneur and a mogul has been her insistence on inclusiveness.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
What did I say at
Absolutely.
the beginning of this evening about the DNA of the Barbadian in terms of social justice and fairness?
Yes.
So that when Rihanna says to a fat girl, a thin girl, a sexy girl, a slim girl, a tall girl, a short girl, a girl with prosthesis, a drag queen, all kinds of things, Rihanna says, come and model my stuff. When she says that I am going to make makeup for every shade
shades. I
of
love
human
it. Yes.
being, from the whitest of the whitest to the blackest of the blackest.
She has it. Isn't
What
it wonderful?
is she exhibiting if not Barbadian
Inclusiveness.
DNA with
Yeah.
that commitment to inclusiveness?
Very
and when she continues to tweet and speak truth to power, what is she exhibiting if not friends of all, satellites of none?
That's
So
right.
that, believe you me when I say to you that your government will want to be able to have infrastructure built for the good society.
Yes, Roger, do you hear
But
that?
it is
Come here,
a
here. There he
constraint,
is.
literally, of being the third most indebted country in the world when we inherited the government. The good news is that we've moved from 176 debt to GDP to 118%, roughly 118.5% debt to GDP.
Well, you're
and
getting
we
there.
hope that we can make some further adjustments by bringing to a closure in the next, I'm not going to give you a time frame, the external debt negotiations.
Yes.
We are doing all of that while at the same time trying to structure out a public works program to build back the infrastructure. We had meetings with both the public and private sector to see how we can quicken the pace and the volume of roads and sidewalks that we are currently doing because of the fact that the country suffered from not having it done for the better part of the last decade. So stay the course with us, and hopefully when you see me in a year or two, you will be able to tell me, I see the difference.
I will
with the
probably see the
sidewalks.
difference for sure, you know.
Thank you.
Yes, because I'm always in Barbados.
Thank you.
I'm always there. Anyway, what?
One last question.
Yes.
The gentleman behind you
as
is
far
waiting
as-
patiently.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. I was thinking to let you know that the crime rate in Barbados, this all has to do with education, you think? The kids that, they said the people.
It's part of it,
that's
but we'll
in
talk about
prison
it after. It's part of it.
Is about like 70%.
That's why we're doing the educational reform that I spoke about earlier. No problem. Which parish are you? St. George? Okay, got you.
Good night, Prime Minister.
It seems to be a lot of St. George.
My name is
people
Wayne
here.
Lewis. I've been living in this country since 1972.
Yes, sir.
And my question is to you. My question is really about the banks, right? This year, early this year, my mother went down to Barbados to take care of some business for me, and was told by the banks that she cannot, or they give her all the paperwork and everything, that she can get none of the money, or she can take care of anything. I have to come down and take care of it myself.
Yeah. Part of the problem that we're facing is that the banks in the region, as part and parcel of all of the actions that have been taken since 2008, are subject to all kinds of new regulations and procedures. In fact, opening a bank account now is like pulling teeth, harder than ever. And what is also happening is that in some instances people are being unbanked. And that is because the 5 banks that we have are all externally owned, 3 Canadian, 2 Trinidadian. And they themselves have been the subject of all kinds of regulations and requirements as part and parcel of this whole new framework internationally. Correspondent banking is what we need in order to trade. But there are some banks in the US who have said, we don't want to work with your bank because, quite frankly, you may be doing things right, you may be doing things wrong, but you're just too small for us to invest the level of money and to get the amount of lawyers and that kind of thing and whatever to go through your systems and your accounts. Because a lot of the local banks don't want to be the subject of losing correspondent banking relations, they've gone the other extreme, and they have prudential guidelines that are good. Now, if you are a 20-year-old child living in your parents' house, tell me how many forms of identification you could carry to the bank. They want proof that you're paying a light bill or a water bill. How you can pay a light bill and water bill when your father or your mother tell you can't pay that in this house because if I want you to leave, you got to be able to leave. How are they going to prove who they are? And why is the threshold for proof now as high as it is? Because what you're effectively doing is unbanking people. So what we are doing in the government is looking at the possibility and the prospect. And part and parcel of the difficulty of these kinds of discussions is that I need to share with you what we're doing, but for people like Tony, it may be written as fait accompli. So I need to say that it is at the stage of policy discussion. And Minister Strawn, before we went into government, did a paper for us that looked at using the post offices as deposit-taking institutions and as basically almost like a post office bank. And he did it in the Tom Adams lecture. we are realizing that we are going to have to take responsibility and have some kind of domestic banking presence again because of what our people are facing with respect to the increase in persons who are being excluded from the banking system or who are being deliberately unbanked. And there are legitimate enterprises under the law who, because they may in other jurisdictions be viewed as risky, are also being told, come and pick up your money from my bank, even if you need a wheelbarrow to pick it up, because we are no longer banking you. Now, this is unacceptable for us. And it's not just Barbados, but it's other countries in the region. So we're going to have to find ways of, one, ensuring that we have a banking presence that still adheres to the very highest of prudential standards, but to remind people that regulation must be appropriate to risk. And last time I checked, the biggest centers for money laundering are still London, New York, and Zurich. Secondly, that we're going to need to be able to determine whether and how we collectively or individually seek to establish banking relationships either through relationship or through ownership of small banking institutions in North America and the UK to ensure that we maintain banks or institutions who do not mind taking the time to go through our standards and our procedures to ensure that we are not guilty of the kind of malpractices that would cause them or us to lose our relationships. But the things that we took for granted 20 years ago, 30 years ago, in a post-9/11 environment and in a post-2008 environment, regrettably, can no longer be taken for granted. And it is forcing our government to be able to take decisions. If we were the government after 2009, I would have been loath for us to take further decisions to get out of commercial banking because of how much the world has changed. I understood why we did it with the National Bank when we did it, but the reality is that the world has changed since then, and we're going to have to find some way of defending the people of our nation by having some form of commercial banking presence that is indigenous again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We want to thank you. We have some presentations for the Prime Minister. Bear with us. We're not finished yet. Miss Angela Pierce, could you please come forward quickly? This is a Barbadian lady who has taken a Barbadian product, Barbadian great cake, and exported it all over the world. Prime Minister.
Thank you. I'm freezing.
Yeah, we're going to have that just now. And from the staff at Team Barbados and associations in New York, we couldn't let the Prime Minister come out here without some token. We're going to ask Sherry Hines, please, to come forward. Yes, warm up with some applause. So it's been a wonderful evening, and we are at the end of it, and it is time to make some quick acknowledgements. Of course, we want to thank our Prime Minister, Honorable Mayor Motley, for joining us, and I want you to join me in wishing her happy birthday in advance, which is in a week or so, and continue good health. I want to thank all of the persons who have been here today, Dr. Scott, for your prayers, the crew who did the introductions, Tracy, Heather, and UC. We want to thank the DJ Spider who was there. We want to thank the team at Kingsborough College who've been very accommodating. And I want to say that an event like this could not come off without a lot of hard work. The team Barbados, I believe, is somewhere behind. But I want to acknowledge my staff at the consulate, at BTMI, at Invest Barbados, and of course upstairs at the mission for all their hard work. And you would have noticed, I have to say this, you would have noticed that our consul, John, is not with us. Unfortunately, his wife passed on Thursday. So those of you who know Mr. John Blackman, please reach out to him and remember him in your prayers. It's been a great night, people. Thank you for coming out. Get home safely. There are lots of refreshments behind, and if you haven't picked up your bag, please do so. Thanks a lot.